Chapter 2361. Rong Yuishinlin raised his head, and his expression changed. A ball of snow-white light was rushing towards him at lightning speed. What was that? Rong Yuishinlin raised his hand, and a blue light blasted towards the white light. Just as the blue light was about to hit the white light, which was like a small sun, suddenly moved 10 feet in the air. Then, with a flash, a bolt of lightning struck towards Rong Yuishinlin. The speed of the lightning was unbelievably fast. Rong Yuishinlin hurriedly retreated to the side, and the lightning struck the soles of his feet. With a loud bang, Rong Yuishinlin's ears almost went deaf. It also directly smashed the blue stone into pieces. With this loud bang, the white light also landed on the ground, and then a pit suddenly appeared on the ground. Rong Yuishinlin watched as his precious tree was directly smashed into the ground. When all the dust settled, Rong Yuishinlin took a closer look, and the blue veins on his forehead jumped. There was a huge pit in the originally flat ground. At the bottom of the pit, there was a fruit tree with half of the blue fruits. The branches and leaves were scattered, and the trunk was broken into 7 or 8 pieces. Not a single fruit could be seen on it. Other than that, there was nothing in the big pit. Rong Yuishinlin almost couldn't believe his eyes. He clearly saw that the white light was faintly wrapped around a big snow-white stone, and then it smashed into the pit. How could there be no shadow? It couldn't have been burned away like a meteorite. He clearly saw a huge piece. Ning Xiuma and Shun Juli had been holding hands and staying in the heavenly stone. The heavenly stone was spinning at high speed when it was transmigrated. If their kung fu hadn't reached such an abnormal level, even their internal organs would have been flung out. Just as they were feeling dizzy, the stone finally stopped. After that, Ning Xiuma was dumbstruck as she saw a pile of sparkling blue fruits fall from above her head, almost hitting her feet. I didn't expect this backward continent to have such a master. I almost fell into his trap. The crystal column in the heavenly stone began to flash. Fortunately, I was able to drill into the ground in time to avoid a disaster. But I have exhausted my energy at this moment, and I can't move to another place. You too, use these fruits to restore your strength. Although I haven't seen these fruits before, I feel that they are rich in spiritual energy. They will be helpful to your cultivation. Ning Xiuma Shunjili picked up a fruit and looked at it. He spat out 3 words, Carefree Island. Ning Xiuma suddenly realized Rong Yuishinlin's territory. Shunjili looked at the fruits on the ground. There were over 100 fruits, and although they were different sizes, for better or worse, they were all ripened. He lifted his sleeve and placed the fruits into his storage space. Then, he took out 2 of the largest and brightest fruits and washed them with clean water before handing them to Ning Xiuma. These are blue crystal fruits. They're delicious and full of spiritual energy. In the Tianxi continent, only Carefree Island has one of these. Rongyue Tianlan regards them as more important than his own life. Normally, he only uses these fruits to make wine. Every time they ripen, he would give me 2 as a show of respect. Every time I pick one more, he would feel incomparably pained. Ning Xiuma took them and tasted them. The taste was indeed unprecedentedly sweet and delicious, and she felt refreshed as soon as she took a bite. The heavenly stone weakly sent out a line of words. There is only one. Yes, there's only one. Rong Yuishinlin spent a great deal of effort to cultivate it. Shenjuli knew the inside story. The heavenly stone sent out another line of words, but this time it was even weaker, but that one has already been smashed into 7 or 8 pieces. Chapter 2362. Shun Juli. He seemed to see Rong Yuishinlin's burning eyes. He patted the stone wall sympathetically. Then you have to hide well. Don't let him find you. Heavenly Lost Stone. He pulled Ning Xiuma's hand again. Let's go out. Nothing. Nothing. Rong Yuishinlin had used the Earth Escape technique to search the ground within a radius of 3,000 to 4,000 feet, but he still couldn't find a shadow of the strange stone. Strange. How could it not be here? Even if the stone drilled into the ground, it would leave a hole, but other than the big hole, He couldn't find any other hole. Could it be that his eyes were playing tricks on him? That wasn't a white stone. Instead, it was a ball of lightning. Rong Yuishanlin was puzzled, but he really couldn't find it, so he had to come out of the ground again. As soon as he came out, he was stunned and stared at a place. Dizun, Miss Ning. Shun Juli sat leisurely in the small pavilion, as if he had never disappeared in the past 100 years. He tapped the table with his fingers and looked at Rong Yuishanlin, who had just come out like a groundhog. Rong Yuishanlin, what are you looking for? Ning Shuma sat beside Shun Juli and looked at Rong Yuishanlin with sympathy. Island Master Rong Yu looks a little embarrassed. Rong Yuishanlin, who had always been free and easy and valued his image more than his life, looked as if he had been struck by lightning at this moment. After a while, he found his voice. Dizun, the stone, the white light, just now, was yours. Shun Juli raised his eyebrows. Do I look like a stone to you? Rong Yuishanlin. He also felt that his question was a little messy. Although the Dizun liked to wear white, his image was still worlds apart from that of stone. His gaze turned to Ning Shuima. Ning Shuima was wearing a red dress, and her smile was as bright as fire. Island Master Rongya doesn't think that I look like a stone, right? Of course not. Thus, no one brought up the topic of the stone again. Rong Yuishanlin was still very happy to see the Dizun and Ning Shuima. He threw aside the pain of having his precious tree smashed to the side. He flicked the dirt off his body, tidied his clothes, and opened his folding fan with a swoosh. With a suave and elegant smile, he said, Dizun, Miss Ning's presence brings light to my humble dwelling. Let's have a toast. The wine was naturally the wine brewed from the blue crystal fruit. Just as Shun Juli had said, it was the best wine. It made people want to drink a second mouthful. Naturally, the dishes were also well prepared. It was extraordinarily sumptuous. The chef that Rong Yu raised on Tianlan Island was said to be the imperial chef of the imperial palace in the human world. The food that he made was extremely exquisite. Ancestor, Miss Ning, where have you been for the past 100 years? It took me a long time to find it. Rong Yuishanlin was puzzled to death. In the past 100 years, he had searched high and low for them, but he couldn't find any trace of them. Now, these two people seemed to have popped out from the ground. Rong Yuishanlin, she's my wife now. Shun Juli took a sip of wine and then threw out a bomb. The wine cup in Rong Yuishanlin's hand shook and some wine spilled out. His gaze fell on Ning Shuima and he blurted out, You're already married? Then, why haven't I seen the heavenly thunder of the God Empress? Shun Juli sighed slightly. It's a long story. He and Rong Yuishanlin were friends who had gone through life and death together. Naturally, he didn't want to hide anything from him, so he briefly told him about his trip to the God-Demon continent. Chapter 2363. He only said that Ning Shuima was reborn in the Divine Demon continent, and he finally found her there. After going through some hardships, they finally resolved the knot in their hearts and became husband and wife. Rong Yu Atanlan knew that the ancestor always spoke concisely. Although this extremely brief experience was downplayed by him, there must have been countless bloody storms in it. It might even be more exciting than the storybooks he read. Fortunately, although these two went through hardships, they were still together. They were so loving, so everything was enough. Looking at their current level of affection, even a standard eligible bachelor like him could not help but feel envious. Shun Juli and Rong Yu Atanlan had not seen each other for 100 years. When old friends met, they naturally had a lot to talk about. 1,000 cups were not enough to drink with a bosom friend, let alone a friend who had been separated for 100 years. According to Rong Yu Atanlan, they must drink to their heart's content and not return until they were drunk. The banquet between the three of them was naturally a joyous one. During this banquet, Ning Shuima also learned from Rong Yu Atanlan about the changes in the Tianxi continent in the past 100 years. For example, Changkong country had a new monarch. Ji Yunhao had passed away and his son had succeeded the throne. For example, the former crown prince Shi Ju was now the famous wisdom king. He was the kind of person who could make the earth tremble with a stomp of his feet. Princess Ming Wan, who used to be in power in the wisdom king manner, left home after her brother took over the throne. Some people said that she had already cultivated to become a deity, while others said that she lived in seclusion. Anyway, no one had ever seen her again. And the one that Rongyue Tanlan enjoyed talking about the most was the former crown prince of Chongkong country, Ji Yanhuang. It was said that this martial arts genius had been crazily looking for the whereabouts of a woman in the Six Realms. His whereabouts were uncertain. Back then, Ji Yunhao was always afraid that this brother would suddenly wake up and come a fight with him for the throne, so he sent many assassins to assassinate him, but they were all killed by him. Because he was always a little crazy, everyone thought that this genius was crippled. Who would have thought that after being crazy for more than 10 years, he would suddenly wake up and return to Buddha Lotus Mountain to cultivate? In a short 30 years, he actually broke through to the heaven realm and became an immortal. He became the guardian elder of Buddha Lotus Mountain, and his status was second only to Yelu Jing. In the entire Tianci continent, he was a well-known figure. However, after he succeeded in his cultivation, he didn't stay at Buddha Lotus Mountain often. Every year, he would spend most of his time traveling outside. Ning Xiuma and Shun Juli looked at each other. According to the heavenly Tao stone, the first pair they had to help was the marriage of immortal Ji. Ning Xiuma was wondering who this immortal Ji was. She didn't expect to hear this news from Rongyue Tianlan. Looks like this immortal Ji was referring to Ji Yanhuang. However, Tian Xueqing was already dead, and Ji Yanhuang had been crazy for her for more than 10 years. Who could his marriage be now? Thinking about Ji Yanhuang, who had helped her before, Ning Xiuma's heart darkened. She secretly decided to help him this time and help him find his true love. Is Ji Yanhuang in Buddha Lotus Mountain now? Rongyue Tianlan shook her head slightly. Probably not. Usually, he would be wandering around the Six Realms during this season. Wandering around the Six Realms. That's a really wide range. Ning Xiuma looked at Shun Juli. Great God, can you guess where Ji Yanhuang is now? Shun Juli raised his hand and poured a cup of tea for her. He said firmly, there's no need to guess. Let's go back to Buddha Lotus Mountain. He will definitely come to find us. Chapter 2364. Xueqing is already dead. A new person can be appointed. Be happy for 100 years and have many children and grandchildren. That green robe was like a flower in the dark, blooming and withering in an instant. Xueqing. Ji Yanhuang cried out in pain, but he could only watch as she fell and was swallowed by the darkness, never to be seen again. His heart tightened, and every breath he took was filled with immense pain. Where is she? Where is she? He stood in a huge pit. His hands were covered with wounds, and blood flowed all over the ground, but he did not feel anything. He only stared blankly at the bottom of the pit. His expression was like that of a lost child, despair, complete and utter despair. He did not know how long he had been standing there, but he did not use any protective barrier. He was exposed to the violent wind and snow, receiving the slashes of the wind and snow as if he was trying to atone for his sins. It was as if as long as he stood there for a while, she would forgive him and appear. Xueqing. He shouted and opened his eyes. The night was silent, and he did not sleep for a long night. He knew that he was dreaming again. He dreamed of the moment when Xueqing died. He dreamed of the scene that caused him to feel pain in his bones. Over and over again, he had already dreamed of this scene countless times. Every time, it was this kind of bone-piercing pain. It was said that the 18th layer of the underworld was where the most heinous criminals were locked up. However, the underworld only applied one type of punishment to these people. They were made to experience the most painful period of their lives every day. Day after day, year after year, the pain was like an endless circle. There was no beginning, no end. There was only a lost soul, and they were tortured by the memories of being dismembered over and over again. Was he now imprisoned in the 18th layer of hell? This was good too. At least, he could see her once every day, no matter how much pain that scene made him go crazy. He was willing to endure it. At least he could see her, compared to not being able to find her in the real world. He would rather live in hell. His entire body was cold. and his heart was numb from the pain. He did not know when, but the wind had weakened by a lot. A few snowflakes blew in front of him, but Jian Huang was mesmerized by these snowflakes. When he opened his eyes again, his heart began to beat wildly. This was a scene that he had never encountered in his countless dreams. The wind and snow had stopped, and that person was wearing a sky-blue robe. She stood there quietly, looking at him without any sadness or joy. Xueqing, he wanted to pounce on her and hug her, but his feet seemed to be nailed to the ground. After waiting for so long, hundreds of years flashed by him, leaving only that beautiful face deeply imprinted in his mind, just like the person in front of him. He strenuously took a step forward as his hoarse voice sounded like a dried-up stream. Xueqing, so you're not dead. That's great, you're not dead. His body trembled violently, as if he could not withstand the huge emotional fluctuations. It was as if he would kneel on the ground in the next second. Tian Xueqing smiled at him. You're wrong. I'm already dead. The one standing in front of you is already a dead man. She tilted her head slightly, looking innocent and seductive. Are you afraid? Jian Huang stopped in his tracks and closed his eyes. He walked in front of her and hugged her tightly. His arms tightened as he said in a low voice, I was afraid. I was so afraid that you would never come back. Xueqing, don't leave me again, all right? His embrace was like an iron hoop that encircled her tightly. Chapter 2365. His embrace was like an iron hoop tightly encircling her, but Tian Xueqing did not seem to feel any pain as she continued to speak. Yin Huang, I'm already dead. If you want me to come back to life, you have to use your life in exchange. Are you willing? Her voice was still light, but there was a trace of evil in it. Her embrace was too real, too warm. Her cold fragrance lingered around him like a gentle hand, soothing all the uneasiness in his heart. Hugging her, it was as if he was hugging his entire world. The empty hole in his heart was finally blocked, and he felt extremely warm. Even if he knew that she was his inner demon, he could not bear to push her away. Jian Huang closed his eyes, still hugging her tightly, not willing to let go. His voice had a trace of relief. You gave me an illusion, and I'm very happy. My life, if you want it, you can take it. Tian Xueqing smiled faintly, and in that instant, her appearance suddenly changed. An ice blade condensed in her hand, and she ruthlessly stabbed it towards Jian Huang. Her voice was still as gentle as before, full of affection. Then, I'll take it away. He felt a pain between his eyebrows, as if he was being pricked by a needle. At the same time, a cool female voice rang out, like a gurgling spring water flowing beside his ear. Quickly wake up. Hey, quickly wake up. The scene in front of him scattered like shooting stars, returning to darkness. All of a sudden, he felt a small hand reaching for his pulse. Suddenly startled, he opened his eyes and saw a 12 to 13-year-old girl squatting beside him. Seeing that he had woken up, she let out a long sigh of relief. You're finally awake. I can even pull you back from chi deviation. My medical skills must have improved again. She seemed to be smiling happily, but Jian Huang could not smile at all. There seemed to be a problem with his eyesight. He could only vaguely see that the girl was wearing a green dress, and her hair was simply draped behind her back. He could not see her face clearly, as if there was a thin layer of fog separating them. But based on his intuition, this was a delicate and beautiful girl. The girl waved her hand in front of his face. What's wrong? What do you feel uncomfortable? Jian Huang frowned and said indifferently, I'm fine. Thank you for saving me. I will definitely repay you for saving my life in the future. The young girl tilted her head, but did not stop him. She watched as he stood up and slowly walked forward. With a flick of her hand, a silver needle pierced towards Jian Huang. Jian Huang was caught off guard and actually fell into her trap. His leg went numb, and he could no longer walk. He softly fell to the ground. At the same time, his entire body stiffened and he was unable to move. Jian Huang's voice was cold as he asked, Miss, do you have any other advice? The young girl ran in front of him and carefully examined his injuries. She then looked at his eyelids and calmly said, Your chi went into a fork and collided with your eyes. Your eyes need to be treated, otherwise they will be crippled. I only hastily bandaged the penetrating wound on your abdomen. If you go out like this, you won't live for more than 3 days. All right, I'm done. Are you sure you want to leave now? Ji Yin Huang was silent for a moment before he finally said, Then I'll have to trouble you, Mississippi. What he wanted to do was not in a hurry. For the past 100 years, he had been searching for Tian Xueqing. He did not know if she was still alive, but he had to be alive. He did not want to be reincarnated again and forget about her. So after searching for more than 10 years without any results, he suddenly realized that there were specks of white in his black hair. For a moment, he felt as if he was struck by lightning. He still had not found her, so how could he grow old? Chapter 2366. Thus, he returned to Buddha Lotus Mountain and began to cultivate like a madman. His aptitude was originally very high, and when he cultivated without any distractions, he actually broke through several levels and entered the first level of the heaven realm in 20 years. According to the current saying, he had become an immortal and attained the Tao. The vicissitudes of life did not change his appearance, but changed his state of mind. He was more open to everything in this world. Imperial power and fame were like dung to him, but he could not let go of the obsession in his heart. He did not believe that Tian Xueqing's soul had really dissipated, so he mainly cultivated the soul summoning technique. However, even though he had cultivated this technique to the peak, he still could not summon even half of her soul. It was said that a soul that died unjustly would not be reincarnated. Tian Xueqing must have died unwillingly, and she must have hated him. Her soul should be floating in this world, but he did not know why he could not summon her. Unknowingly, this obsession had become his inner demon, entangling him every day. The news of the ancestors' return was like a spring breeze blowing across the entire Tianci continent, and everyone in the world was excited. Ever since the disappearance of the ancestor, the Tianci continent was somewhat chaotic. Without his iron fist to keep the balance, several countries had gone to war. Although it was not to the extent of causing a world war, it was indeed difficult for the people to make a living these years. When the ancestor returned, Kong country and Feishan country were at loggerheads, and war was on the verge of breaking out. When the ancestor returned, he did not even make an official appearance. He only asked Yalu Jing and to pass a message to the monarchs of the two countries, and the war was put to an end. The ancestor was like a savior in the Tianci continent, and his return made many people's blood boil. The monarchs of various countries, sect leaders, and families all rushed to Buddha Lotus Mountain to pay their respects to the ancestor. Many people who were not qualified to enter the mountain also wandered around Buddha Lotus Mountain after hearing the news of the ancestor's return. They kowtowed to Buddha Lotus Mountain sincerely and cried tears of joy. The people of various countries were celebrating, and it was even more lively than the New Year, especially when they heard that the ancestor had gotten married, and that the empress was the former trash Ning Xuema. It was even more lively. Even the monarchs of various countries issued a decree at the same time. When the venerable sovereign returned, the whole country celebrated and pardoned the world. This kind of jubilation naturally alarmed Ji Yin Huang, who was wandering somewhere. He hurriedly rushed back to Buddha Lotus Mountain to pay his respects to his grandmaster and saw Ning Xuema and the ancestor who he had not seen for a long time. Ji Yin Huang was, after all, the second in command of the Buddha Lotus Mountain. Naturally, he knew about Ning Xuema's case. He also knew that her soul had been scattered during the lightning tribulation. He didn't expect that not only would she be able to come back unscathed, her cultivation level had already surpassed the heaven realm. He didn't need to fight with her to know that her current cultivation level was unfathomable. While he was happy for her, he also felt a renewed sense of hope. Ning Xuema was able to return even after her soul was scattered. Would Tian Xueqing be able to return as well? Would he be able to see her again? He immediately knelt down and begged the ancestor to show him the right path. The ancestor looked at him for a long time and calculated for a moment. Then he told him that the inner core of the cloud-swallowing beast in the northern underworld Mist Sea and the ghost grass could be used to make the soul-luring incense. The soul-luring incense's ability to attract souls was very strong, and it might be able to bring about a miracle for him. Ji Yanhuang felt as if he had found a treasure. He had already found the ghost grass and was only missing the inner core of the cloud-swallowing beast. Originally, he was 90% sure that he would be able to obtain the inner core of the cloud-swallowing beast, but he never expected that he would suffer from chi deviation at that time and almost get swallowed by the cloud-swallowing beast. Fortunately, he was saved by the girl in front of him. Chapter 2367. He was thinking about the cloud-swallowing beast's inner core and did not want to stay here any longer. After he woke up, he wanted to leave. The young girl waved her hand. "Since I saved you, I will definitely save you thoroughly." Master said, "If you want to save someone, you should save them all the way." Therefore, even if he had rejected her, she would have forced him to stay and only let him go when he recovered. Ji Yanhuang looked at the young girl in front of him and was momentarily absent-minded. Although he could not see clearly, he could see that the young girl was wearing a green gown. Looking at her, he seemed to see the figure that he yearned for day and night. He was willing to pay any price in exchange for her return, but why? Why hasn't she returned? He had already given up everything. So why hasn't she returned? Shueqing, Ji Yanhuang's eyes seemed to be filled with a myriad of changes. Although he still had that carefree look on his face, the intense emotions in his eyes were like a raging inferno under a layer of ice, burning fiercely. The young girl raised her eyebrows and her voice was somewhat unhappy. "Why do you keep looking at me?" Ji Yanhuang regained his senses and his emotions gradually calmed down. There were many young girls in green gowns in this world, but there was only one Tian Shueqing. He should not have stared at a 13 or 14-year-old girl to search for her shadow. He casually changed the topic. "You like green?" The young girl nodded and removed the silver needles that were sealing his acupuncture points. She faintly said, "It's all right." Ji Yanhuang suddenly had the intention to ask why. Usually, he was not willing to talk nonsense with others, but for some reason, he started to talk more today. The young girl pulled him up and casually replied, "There's no why. If you like it, you like it." Ji Yanhuang choked and did not say anything else. The young girl led Ji Yanhuang forward. Along the way, they passed through flowers and willows, bypassing fake mountains and flowing rivers. Along the way, there were people who constantly greeted the young girl. The young girl stopped and nodded her head in acknowledgement until a handsome young man casually waved a fan and walked in front of the young girl. "Ching Ching, you brought back another injured person." The young girl stopped and sized up the person. Then, she faintly smiled and said, Yun, I see that you have recovered well. You can go down a mountain now." Yin Shitzi sighed when he heard what was said. He looked as if he was about to cry. After not seeing each other for so many days, the first thing Ching Ching said was to chase me away. "I'm so sad." Ching Ching couldn't help but laugh. She waved her hand and said, "Don't mess around. I don't have time to deal with you right now." Yin Shitzi glanced at her resentfully. Ching Ching has a new patient and no longer pays attention to the old patient. "Sai, forget it." "Then, this Shitzi will go down the mountain. Don't worry, after a few days, this Shitzi will definitely return." Ever since Ching Ching had saved him once a year ago, he had fallen in love with Ching Ching at first sight. He ran up Qingji Mountain time and time again, but if it wasn't for a headache or heartache, it was all minor ailments. It wasn't until half a year ago, when he was almost assassinated and had a hole in his stomach, that he came in lying down. As soon as he saw Ching Ching's face, he showed her the hole in his stomach, as if he was presenting a treasure, proving that he was really injured this time. Ching Ching used 3 months to heal him, but he kept saying that it would take 100 days to heal his bones and tendons. Moreover, not only did he have his bones and tendons injured, his stomach was also pierced by a sword. No matter what, he would need at least 200 days to heal. He refused to leave no matter what, and Ching Ching couldn't do anything about it. Ching Ching's master was even more benevolent and had no reason to chase him away. Chapter 2368. Thus, Yanshitsi had stayed there until now and had to leave today because of his family's misfortune. Yanshitsi waved his fan as he left. His annoying words could be heard in the wind. Ching ching, wait for me to come back. Don't be too gentle to the new patient, just torture him to death. You only need to be gentle to me. Aya. His figure suddenly staggered and sat on the ground, unable to get up for a long time. He looked around but could only see Ching Ching and Ji Yunhuang's figures in the distance. He rubbed his legs and scolded. Who is it? Who dares to plot against this young master? Hey, how did you protect this young master? A sentence faintly floated from the tree. Master, there was a rock under your feet. This subordinate was about to remind you, but Yanshitsi stood up and angrily kicked the rock away, limping away. Ching walked in front, so she did not notice Ji Yunhuang's slightly raised lips. Usually, Ji Yunhuang did not have a mind to care about these people, but today he felt that Yanshitsi was especially repulsive, so he took action to teach him a lesson. His mental power was profound, so Yanshitsi and that shadow guard naturally could not tell that he was the one who did it. Ji Yunhuang stared at the slender figure in front of him, his mind still reverberating with Yanshitsi's words, Ching Ching. In this world, there were many girls with the word Ching in their names. Ji Yunhuang had walked the Tianci continent for many years and had heard countless of Ching-s and Chings. But no matter how many times he had heard it, when he heard this taboo word again, his heart would fiercely tighten. Could it be? Could it be her? Every time, he would subconsciously chase after her with this glimmer of hope, but without exception, he would fail. Ji Yunhuang pretended to ask casually, May I ask for Mrs. Name? Ching Ching's footsteps paused for a moment before she continued walking forward. We met by chance. If you don't ask me, I won't ask you. You could just call me Miss Ching. Ji Yunhuang did not have to ask for her name, so after hearing this, he did not say anything else. It was just that her name had the word Ching in it. She was not her. Ching led him through a magnificent corridor and arrived at a room. Although Ji Yunhuang couldn't see clearly, he felt that this was a very elegant and simple room. There was a bouquet of unknown flowers in the vase, emitting a faint fragrance. The young girl turned around to face Ji Yunhuang and said, This is the meditation garden. From now on, you will recuperate here. She briefly introduced the surrounding environment, then led him to the bedside and lightly said, Take off your shirt. Ji Yunhuang stared blankly for a moment and sat there without moving. The young girl raised her eyebrows impatiently and said in a cool voice, What? You're a man. Are you afraid that I'll take advantage of you? That's right, let me say this first. I'm just treating your injuries. Don't say anything about me taking responsibility for you. All right, take off your clothes. Do you want me to take them off for you? Or do you want to take them off yourself? One had to say that although Ching was cold, she was really strong and narcissistic. This couldn't be blamed on her. She was beautiful and had good medical skills. She was famous, and all the famous young masters liked her. Because Ching had treated their illnesses, there were many people who wanted her to take responsibility for them. There were also many people who said that when Ching grew up, they would marry her. All of these made Ching extremely annoyed, so every time she treated a patient, she would say these things as a routine. Chapter 2369. Ji Yunhuang did not know what to think for a moment. He slowly took off his shirt, revealing his jade-white chest. On his abdomen, there was a gauze that Ching had hastily wrapped around his abdomen. Blood was faintly seeping out from the gauze. The red blood contrasted against his jade-like skin. Amidst his healthy body, there was a cruel and enchanting aura. Ching looked at his smooth upper body. Her eyes were somewhat uneasy as she averted her gaze. She did not expect that the patient she had casually picked up would have such a good figure. It made her, who had seen countless naked bodies because of her medical practice, unable to take her eyes off him. Ji Yunhuang could not see Ching's expression clearly. He only saw her standing beside the bed without saying anything. He faintly frowned. He was born handsome. These years, there were many women who stared at him, more than the stars in the sky. Although he usually did not show it, he was somewhat annoyed. He thought that this girl was special, but he did not expect. His voice was slightly cold. "Miss Ah-Ching, is there something wrong?" Ah-Ching glanced at him. Her voice was indifferent and cold. "Your figure is very good." Ji Yanhuang was speechless. He never thought that she would say such words in front of him. For a moment, he did not know how to respond. Ah-Ching's voice sounded like she was praising a work of art. "The texture of your skin is distinct. You are thin but not bony. Your proportions are balanced, and there is not a trace of excess fat. If you did not suffer such a serious injury, your skin color would be more moist." Ji Yanhuang was speechless. He seriously suspected that she was looking at him as if she was looking at a human specimen. It made him have an impulse to immediately cover his clothes. "Lie down." Ah-Ching threw out the two words again. These two words made it difficult for people not to misunderstand. Ji Yanhuang was on guard. "What are you doing?" "I am a doctor. What can I do?" Ah-Ching was somewhat impatient. She twirled a silver needle in her hand. "Don't you want to treat your injuries?" "All right." It was him who misunderstood. Ji Yanhuang did not know what expression to make. The injury on his body was indeed serious. Just a slight movement caused him to break out in cold sweat. He slowly lay down. "Thank you for your trouble." Ah-Ching did not comment. She raised her hand and untied the gauze. Her actions could not be considered gentle. She did not know why, but when she saw his face, she felt an inexplicable anger rising in her heart. As soon as the bandage was removed, blood flowed out, making the wound even more hideous. The cloud-swallowing beast did not have any other advantages, but the wounds it created were not easy to heal. When he was injured, he had treated it himself, and Ah-Ching had also helped him treat it once. Unexpectedly, the wound still did not heal. Seeing the blood flowing out once again, Ji Yanhuang frowned slightly. His gaze once again turned to Ah-Ching. "Miss Ah-Ching, do you know any suturing techniques?" Ah-Ching raised her eyebrows and looked at him. "What suturing technique?" Originally, there was no suture technique in this era. No matter how serious the injury was, it was wrapped in gauze. After Ning Xuema came, this suture technique was passed down in Buddha Lotus Mountain. Ji Yanhuang was one of them. Everything he saw was a blur, so he naturally could not suture it himself. He could only explain the main points of suturing. Ah-Ching was very smart. She was very persistent in anything related to medicine and listened very seriously. After listening to Ji Yanhuang's explanation, she glanced at Ji Yanhuang. "I didn't expect your medical skills to be so good." Ji Yanhuang slightly lowered his eyes and did not reply. That year, Tian Xueching was seriously injured and was dragged underground by the monster. That scene became his eternal nightmare. Tian Xueching's blood-covered appearance flashed in front of his eyes from time to time. Chapter 2370. The image of Tian Xueching covered in blood flashed in front of his eyes from time to time. He thought that if he could save her, the first thing he would do was to treat her injuries with his own hands. Therefore, he put in a lot of hard work and learned medical skills. His ability to deal with external injuries was superb. Unfortunately, he only had medical skills, but he did not have the person he wanted to treat. His heart was touched, and the familiar, suffocating pain came. He closed his eyes slightly. "Xueching, even if I have to risk my life, I will find a way to bring you back." He still wanted to challenge the cloud-swallowing beast. Ah-Ching naturally did not know that his heart was filled with so many emotions. She was studying the special silver needle and fish catgut thread that Ji Yanhuang took out. After studying for a while, she tested it on a piece of cowhide nearby. After confirming that the technique was correct, she walked in front of Ji Yanhuang. Just as she was about to insert the needle, she suddenly stopped and looked at Ji Yanhuang with a smile. "Are you afraid of pain?" Ji Yanhuang shook his head slightly. "I'm not afraid. Miss, please feel free to do it." He had experienced the most painful injuries before, so why would he care about the pain of suturing? Ah-Ching looked at him for a moment and pursed her lips. "Then I'll start now. Bear with it." She lowered her head and stitched him up. Such a forceful suturing was naturally very painful, but Ji Yanhuang's face was still as calm as before. He did not even frown. Ah-Ching looked at him and was somewhat impressed. She could not tell that such a gentle and refined person was actually a tough guy. She glanced at his forehead and saw faint cold sweat. Obviously, no matter how tough his personality was, he still had a sense of pain. Stay here and don't move. Wait for me. Ah Ching seemed to have finally made up her mind. She took out a small porcelain bottle from her sleeve and pointed the mouth of the bottle at Ji Yinhuang. The fragrance lingered in the air. Ji Yinhuang's wound was originally very painful, but after inhaling the fragrance, he gradually could not feel the pain. Even his 5 senses were slowly weakening. He was shocked and subconsciously held his breath. As a superior, he was born with a noble status, but he also had a strong sense of vigilance that matched it. Ah Ching looked at him and pursed her lips. Are you afraid that I will poison you? If I want to kill you, 1 needle is enough, or I can just leave you alone. This little girl's mouth was really poisonous. However, what she said was the truth. Ji Yinhuang relaxed and asked, What is this fragrance? Ah Ching glanced at him. This is the fragrance of flowers. It can reduce the pain of wounds and weaken the 5 senses for a short period of time. My master left this to me. There's only half a bottle in total. Since you taught me the art of suturing, I'm giving it to you. Don't waste it. I'm going to operate on you now. You can't move an inch. Can you do it? Although she was young, she had a strong aura. Ji Yinhuang glanced at her, then closed his eyes and steadied his breathing. However, his heart was not as calm as his appearance. At that moment, he suddenly recalled a warm spring afternoon with a gentle breeze. When he was seriously injured and lying in bed, Tian Xueqing was treating his wounds while explaining to him the various kinds of ointments. Occasionally, her jet black hair would fall on his chest. The wind would caress her hair, bringing about a slight itch. That itch went all the way to the bottom of his heart. It was like a little claw, gently scratching his heart. Perhaps he had already been tempted at that time. But at that time, he refused to listen to his heart and subconsciously avoided this feeling. Chapter 2371. But at that time, he refused to listen to his heart and subconsciously avoided this feeling. The words he said were as cold as ice. You spent so much effort to save me. Are you afraid that if I die, you won't be able to be the crown princess? At that time, he could clearly feel Tian Xueqing's body trembling. There was pain, sorrow, and disbelief in her eyes. In the end, she closed her eyes. When she opened them again, her eyes were cold and calm. She smiled faintly. Her voice was calm, but it still trembled slightly. That's right. If you die, how can I be the crown princess? So, Your Highness, please let it go. Xueqing will do her best to heal you, even if it's for the position of crown princess. Memories were like knives that cut into his heart. Ah Ching felt that she was usually cold enough, but she did not expect that the patient she randomly picked up was even colder than her. Ji Yinhuang lay there motionlessly, while Ah Ching swiftly and gracefully treated his wounds. The two of them cooperated very well. After 2 hours, Ah Ching finished treating his wound. Then, she hurriedly put away the small porcelain bottle and carefully closed the lid with a pained expression. His 5 senses slowly returned to Ji Yinhuang's body. At the same time, his abdomen felt numb and itchy, as if countless ants were biting his wound. He closed his eyes and didn't say a word, enduring it out of habit. Ah Ching looked at him again and said, Rest well today. Don't get out of bed and don't eat. After telling him a lot of things, she finally said, You're applying EE ointment on your abdomen. You'll feel numb and itchy. Although the process is a bit painful, it's the fastest way to recover. But if you can't take it anymore, you can ring the bell beside the bed and I'll change the medicine for you. It's fine. There's no need to change. Ji Yinhuang replied with a few words. He only wanted to get better quickly so that he could obtain the cloud-swallowing beast's inner core as soon as possible. He did not care about anything else. Ah Ching nodded slightly and didn't say anything else. She quickly packed up the equipment. Although she had a cold and domineering personality, she was surprisingly attentive and patient. Otherwise, she wouldn't have become a famous genius doctor. Ji Yinhuang opened his eyes, but all he could see was a blurry silhouette. He said in a low voice, Many thanks. If Miss needs anything in the future, this Yin will definitely do his best to help. Although he didn't have any feelings for this girl, but if she was in trouble in the future, he would help her no matter what. There was no other reason than to repay her for saving his life. Achin glanced at him again. You're welcome. I'm here to collect medical fees. In other words, they were each taking what they needed. Ji Yanhuang secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Right now, he was most afraid of owing someone a favor. If he could repay it with money, that would be the best. He didn't ask how much the consultation fee was. With his current strength, no matter how much money it was, he could afford it. However, this girl had a straightforward and bright personality, which was different from other girls. So he smiled and said, no matter what, I still have to thank you for your timely help. If it wasn't for her, he might have been eaten by the wild beasts. Achin nodded slightly. She seemed to feel that her attitude was a little cold, so she added, I'll treat your eyes with acupuncture tomorrow. Then she turned and left. Ji Yanhuang closed his eyes as he thought to himself, this lady has excellent medical skills. Tian Xueqing's figure flashed in his mind. Tian Xueqing used to be a medicine man, and her medical skills were also quite good. Chapter 2372. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. In these 3 days, Ji Yanhuang's eyesight improved day by day. Spirals of green smoke rose from the incense burner, bringing with it a cool fragrance that filled the entire room. Achin sat by the bed and watched as the incense burned shorter and shorter until it finally turned into ashes. She stretched out her hand and slowly pulled out the silver needles from Ji Yanhuang's acupuncture points. Then, she let out a long breath and lifted her hand to remove the cloth covering his eyes. All right, you can open your eyes and see if there is any discomfort. Although her voice was light, it carried a trace of pride. Although she was only 14 years old, as long as she acted, there was no injury that she could not treat. Ji Yanhuang heard her and slowly opened his eyes. At first, his vision was a little hazy, as if there was a layer of fog, but it gradually became clearer and clearer. He finally saw the girl in front of him clearly. She looked to be around 13 or 14 years old. There was still some baby fat on her face, making her look delicate and cute. Her green dress was like the misty rain in Jiangnan. It was light and had an indescribable charm. Her ink-black hair was like a waterfall that cascaded down her back. Her skin was tender and white, as if it could be broken by the wind. The most wonderful thing about her was her pair of bright eyes. It was as if there was a river of stars hidden within them. Her temperament was cold, but there was a trace of purity in her bones. Ji Yanhuang's face instantly turned white. His hands could not help but tremble as he stared at the girl in front of him. At that moment, his heart felt as if it had suddenly fallen from the sky. All the blood in his body flowed backwards. His usually calm and rational mind was now blank. There was only one thought in his mind. Was it her? Was it her? Was it her? Achin's appearance was simply a miniature version of Tian Xueqing. Even her temperament was almost the same. Achin looked at his stunned expression and thought that he had not recovered yet. She slightly frowned and waved her small white hand in front of his face. What happened to you? Are you still unable to see clearly? Before she could finish her sentence, she was suddenly pulled. She was caught off guard and fell onto Ji Yanhuang's body. She was brought into a cold and delicate embrace. Achin was instantly stunned. She had never been in such close contact with anyone before. None of the patients before her had dared to be so disrespectful to her. The man's cold breath mixed with the fragrance of medicine assaulted her face, almost drowning her in an instant. Ji Yanhuang tightened his embrace and felt the familiar scent in his embrace. He was so excited that his heart almost jumped out his chest. They were too alike. Their auras were too similar. Why didn't he feel it before? Achin was most likely Tian Xueqing. If he wanted to be sure, he would have to check Achin's soul. Probing the soul required intimate contact with the person being probed. So Ji Yanhuang subconsciously pulled her into his embrace. Only when she was in his embrace did he realize an important problem. His psychokinesis had only recovered 30 to 40%, so he couldn't detect her soul at all. Ji and Huang hugged the person in his arms, not knowing what to do. At this moment, Qing finally realized that she was being molested. Her face instantly flushed red with anger. She fiercely struggled out of Ji and Huang's embrace and kicked him off the bed. Ji and Huang had never thought that he would be kicked off the bed. He could not help but stare blankly for a moment. Once again, his wound was agitated. He let out a light groan, and his face turned even paler. Qing's eyes were as cold as the stars. At this moment, her eyes were burning with rage. I was kind enough to save you, but you actually dared to molest me. Do you believe that I can easily cripple you? Chapter 2373. Qing took out a silver needle from nowhere. That silver needle was simple and did not have any decorations. Under the light, it shone with a cold luster, but the tip of the needle had a dense emerald green color. With one look, one could tell that it was poisoned. She looked at Ji and Huang, who was kicked off the bed by her with caution. If he dared to take advantage of her again, she would poison him to death. Ji and Huang slowly sat up from the ground. This movement made him feel that his wound had split open again and fresh blood was seeping out. Borrowing this pain, he slowly regained his rationality. She was still so young. If she was really Tian Xueqing, then she was also her reincarnation. He was indeed too excited. Even if the current Qing was really Tian Xueqing, they should take things one step at a time. He was so rash that he was afraid that he would scare her. It would not be good to leave the impression of a lecher on the first time they met. His eyes were deep, like a deep pool that was tightly locked onto her. There seemed to be countless emotions rolling in his eyes, causing Qing to have the illusion that she was about to be pulled into a deep pool and drowned. Her heart skipped a beat, and she retreated 2 steps with caution. This person's gaze was too oppressive. It made her have the urge to turn around and run away. However, this was her territory, so why should she run away? If he dared to take advantage of her again, she would directly cripple him. Qing's eyes flashed with killing intent as she held the silver needle even tighter. Ji and Huang finally calmed down and quickly sorted out his complicated thoughts. He raised his eyes and looked at Qing. Naturally, he saw that she was filled with hostility and alertness. His heart was stifled as he took a light breath. I'm sorry, Miss Qing. The moment I saw you, I thought that I saw my long-awaited wife. You're very similar to her. It's as if you were carved out from the same mold. Speaking until here, his heart ached, and he closed his eyes slightly. The person he once loved was his wife, but now they had become strangers. His voice was somewhat hoarse, and his whole body seemed to be filled with grief. However, he was an extremely handsome man. At this moment, he was simply sitting there, but it was as if he was a desolate ink painting, causing people's hearts to be filled with sorrow. Qing was full of anger, but she couldn't vent it when she saw him like this. She was still young after all, and it wasn't easy for her to deal with this kind of situation. She paused for a moment before saying with a straight face, I'm very sorry that your wife is no longer around, but no matter how much I look like her, I'm not her. If there's a next time, she waved the poisoned needle in her hand. Ji and Huang looked at her with a sincere gaze. This time it's my fault. I've offended Mississippi. I'll accept punishment. His voice paused for a moment before he suddenly changed the topic. My wife is still alive, but before Qing could figure out how to punish him, she was intrigued by his hesitant words. But what? She had been waiting for him to continue, but all she saw was Ji and Huang sitting there with his eyes slightly closed, not saying a word. Ji and Huang closed his eyes, and images kept appearing in front of his eyes. When he finally pulled himself out of his memories, he slowly opened his eyes. The sorrow in his black eyes hadn't completely faded away, and it turned into a little surprise. He had been in a daze for so long, but Qing was still standing there. Her clear eyes were filled with doubt. Seeing that he finally returned to his senses, she asked, But what? Why did this person only say half of what he wanted to say, stuttering? Ji and Huang looked at her curious expression and felt that it was a little funny. Chapter 2374. Ji and Huang looked at her curious expression and felt slightly amused. After all, she was still a child. Ji and Huang did not let her wait for too long. He looked at the scenery outside the window and slowly said, "It's just that she went missing. Maybe she doesn't remember me anymore." His tone was very light, but Ah-Ching could hear the loneliness behind his indifference. Ah-Ching simply found a chair and sat down. She looked at him curiously and asked, "Missing? How'd she go missing?" Ji and Huang looked at her and did not speak for a long time. Just when Ah-Ching thought that she would not get an answer, Ji and Huang's slightly hoarse voice sounded. "I let her down." Ah-Ching waited for a long time and only heard these few words. She did not know what to say. Although this man looked young, she could tell that he was sad. Since it was a sad matter, she did not want to ask any more. She made a sound and did not ask any more questions. She turned around and left, closing the door behind her. Ji and Huang looked at Ah-Ching's departing figure, and his mind was in a mess. For the past 100 years, his mood had been as calm and hopeless as stagnant water. Today, when he saw Ah-Ching, huge waves surged up, and he could not calm down for a long time. Ah-Ching, is she really Tian Xueqing? From their appearance to their temperament, it was as if they were carved from the same mold. They were too alike. They were too alike. It was impossible that they were not the same person. But what if they just happened to look alike, but their souls were not the same? Could it be that this encounter was just a joke played by the heavens? For a time, all kinds of emotions came one after another. This doubt was like a windmill that spun in his heart nonstop. In the end, he sighed and took a deep breath. He closed his eyes and meditated. Whether Ah-Ching was Xueqing or not, he had to check her soul to confirm. The most important thing now was to restore his psychokinesis. After Ah-Ching left Jingxinyuan, her mood was slightly strange. To be precise, when she saw the unconscious patient in front of her, she felt a slight pain in her heart. It was as if something was about to surge up from the bottom of her heart. Her heart was always as calm as still water, and she did not care about living. But after meeting him, her heart would ripple from time to time. Moreover, she always felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity toward him. It was a very strange feeling. Ah-Ching was sure that she had never seen him before. She didn't even know his name until now. She only knew that his surname was Yun when he woke up. Then where did this inexplicable sense of familiarity come from? Ah-Ching thought for a long time, but couldn't think of a reason, so she decided not to think about it anymore. She slowly returned to her room, picked up the secret book left behind by her master, and began to concentrate on studying medicine. Ah-Ching had a very good memory. She had a photographic memory. No matter how difficult and obscure a medical skill was, she could remember it in her mind after reading it once. She could easily understand the profound meaning of it, as if she had learned it before. She was different from other children from a young age. Other children might only be able to remember things after they were 7 or 8 years old, but she could remember things from the moment she was born. She clearly remembered that she had climbed out of a hole. She was able to communicate well with the small animals around her. Although she was a baby, she knew how to feed herself. Moreover, she had raised herself to be white and plump. She had always thought that the animals around her were her own kind. This idea only changed after her master brought her back. Chapter 2375. Her master was the first human she had ever met. It was a winter day when G.M.O. accidentally passed by a forest. Suddenly, he saw a large stone in the middle of the snow-white forest. On top of the jade stone sat a small child who looked like it was carved from jade. The child was swinging its small white feet while tilting its head and looking at GMO with its big clear eyes. It was as if it was looking at a rare thing. Then GMO took her back and took her as his disciple. "How about I name you Ji Xueqing?" A gentle voice sounded. She replied in a childish voice, "Master, your disciple's name is Tian Xueqing." GMO laughed. "All right, then you'll be called Tian Xueqing." GMO taught Tian Xueqing with great care and trained her into a famous genius doctor. He gave Tian Shuicheng a few books that he had painstakingly worked on for many years. Then, he went to travel the world and only came back once every 1 or 2 years. Counting the days, her master should be coming back soon, right? Tian Shuicheng put down the book and looked out the window. When she thought about her master coming back, her eyes were filled with joy, and she threw away all her unhappiness. In the sky, above the clouds, Ning Xuema looked down at the valley below and sighed. I didn't expect Tian Shuicheng to have reincarnated. Great God, you ordered Ji and Huang to come here to give them a chance to meet, right? Shenjuli also glanced at the valley. She didn't reincarnate. She was reborn. So she's still Tian Shuicheng? Great God, I remember that you calculated that she and Ji and Huang were not fated to die. Now that you've put them together, isn't that going against the heavens? Ning Xuema was a little worried. Shenjuli put an arm on her shoulder and said lazily, originally, they were not fated to be together. However, Tian Shuicheng had already died once. Ji and Huang was too obsessed with her, so he managed to fight for a trace of fate. Now, let's see if they can grasp this bit of fate. Ning Xuema looked at him. A trace? Shenjuli twirled the jade flute in his hand and used his other hand to pull up a strand of her black hair. Then he used his fingertips to pick up another strand. In a trace. Ning Xuema naturally hoped that Ji and Huang and Tian Shuicheng would be able to hold hands again, but she looked at Shenjuli and asked, Guru, what will happen if the matchmaking fails? Shenjuli tapped his palm with the jade flute and muttered to himself, it will probably take me a little longer to return to my youth. Ning Xuema thought for a moment and interlocked her fingers with his. She said seriously, Almighty, actually, I think that you're quite cute when you're a kid. I really like you. Don't worry, no matter what you become, I won't abandon you. Shenjuli, did this girl want to raise him as little Nianma? Jian Huang had always been a light sleeper, so when there was movement at the door, he had already woken up. A soft tapping sound came from inside the house, as if something was walking on the floor with its claws. No matter what, that was definitely not a sound that a human could make. What was that? Ji and Huang opened his eyes and looked at the door. It was a pink little pig. It was an extremely adorable little pig. The little pig's body was light pink, and its body was round. It had round little hooves, round black eyes, a chubby little nose, and a little tail with a question mark. It was wearing a sky blue doo-doo with a big word embroidered on it with golden red thread. Chapter 2376. The little pig suddenly jumped up and pointed its front hooves at Ji and Huang. A thick purple light flew towards him. Seeing the purple light flying towards him, Ji and Huang frowned and dodged to the side. However, a large vase behind him was struck by the purple light and exploded into pieces with a bang. It actually dared to break into his house and cause trouble. Ji and Huang raised his eyebrows and raised his hand slightly. The little pig's body involuntarily floated in the air. Ji and Huang looked at the angry little pig in the air and said coldly, explain. What was its purpose for breaking into his room so many times? The little pig's 4 hooves kicked wildly, and it was unable to escape from Ji and Huang's barrier. It finally realized that the person in front of it was much stronger than it was. However, it still refused to admit defeat and raised its head. Its black eyes were burning with anger. What explanation? Why didn't you give this divine beast an explanation when you sneak attacked me? Sneak attack? It was obviously self-defense. Anyone who saw an uninvited guest shouting at them would immediately kick them out. Ji and Huang looked at it indifferently and was too lazy to talk nonsense with it. He went straight to the point and said, Who sent you here? What is your purpose? The little pig stared at him. This is this divine beast's territory. This divine beast naturally can come and go as I please. What about it? Ji and Huang felt that it was a little funny. Your territory? When the little pig heard this, it raised its head even higher. It had an imposing manner as if it had crossed the Yalu River. Yes, the entire Qingji mountain belongs to Master. What belongs to Master is naturally mine. Therefore, this place is naturally my territory. What belongs to Master is mine. What kind of strange theory is this? However, Ji and Wang had no intention of disciplining other people's pets. Therefore, he only caught what he was interested in. Oh, then who is your master? The little pig was even more proud. My master is a famous divine doctor. Not only is she as beautiful as a goddess, but her medical and poison skills are also top-notch. Many people have come here just to see her. Ji and Huang frowned. This pig did not catch the main point. Shouldn't it introduce its master first? The little pig could praise its master for 3 days and 3 nights without stopping. It used all kinds of beautiful words to describe its master. All right, she was the one who cured you. You ungrateful ingrate. My master had just cured you, and now you're sneakily attacking her little darling. Little Pig had an accusing expression on his face, as if Ji and Huang had done something extremely wrong to him. Little sweetheart, what a narcissistic pig. Ji and Huang's heart trembled slightly as he casually replied, Oh, what's your master's name? I don't remember. Piglet widened his eyes in disbelief. Don't tell me you've lost your memory. My master saved you, and you actually forgot her name? Ji and Huang only looked at it indifferently without saying a word. Piglet shook his head in disappointment. My master is Little Pig paused mid-sentence. He rolled his eyes as if he had understood something. He said angrily, Cunning humans. You actually want to trick me. Master definitely didn't tell you his name, right? You want to get Master's name from me, so you can go and ask for her hand in marriage, right? It turned out that this pig was not stupid. Ji and Huang looked at it expressionlessly. Piglet struggled in the barrier for a long time, but was unable to get out. Its body became more and more angry. Chapter 2377. Ji and Huang moved his finger slightly, and the barrier in the air slowly descended. He placed the little pig on the ground, but it was still trapped in the barrier. What did your master send you here for? The little pig wagged its tail and said angrily, To watch over you and let you recuperate in your room. Also, to change your medicine. No wonder he saw a pig the moment he opened his eyes. He raised his eyebrows. You changed my medicine? Where is Lady Ah-Ching? The little pig's tail immediately stood up. Are you questioning this divine beast's ability? This divine beast is the famous Wentian, the #1 medicinal divine beast. Master is busy and has no time to care about you. Ah-Ching was probably frightened by the hug 2 days ago, right? So she sent her pet to watch over him. Ji and Huang's heart moved, but he did not say anything. He carefully looked at the little pig and found that no matter how he looked at it, it was still a pig with a strange color. Ji and Huang looked at it with suspicion. You are Wentian? Although it was a question, he believed most of its words. After all, Ah-Ching's pet should not be a simple pig. Wentian was the legendary divine beast of medicine in the Tianci continent. It was proficient in medicinal knowledge and was naturally sensitive to rare herbs. It was easy to find herbs with Wentian. According to legends, when it was angry, it could summon lightning. However, no one had seen the real Wentian, and the ancient books did not describe the appearance of this divine beast. Thus, the identity of this divine beast was a mystery. It turned out that Wentian's appearance was a pink little pig. Ji and Huang felt that he was not fully awake yet. The little pig wagged its tail proudly. It is the real deal. It raised its hoof and kicked the barrier. Quickly put me down. Otherwise, when I change my medicine, I will electrocute you to death. Was it threatening him? Ji and Huang glanced at it and raised his hand. A barrier suddenly rose into the air, causing the little pig to lose its balance and fall flat on its back inside the barrier. Ji and Huang said coldly, You should stay here. He turned around and left. The little pig was so angry that it stomped its feet. Suddenly, it realized that Ji and Huang was walking towards the door. It anxiously shouted, Come back. Master said that you can't go out now. It was not that weak. Ji and Huang said indifferently, I am just taking a walk. He stepped out the door. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. For the past 3 days, Tian Xueqing had not appeared even once. Instead, it was the pig that she had sent that stayed with Ji and Huang every day. They were inseparable. Ji and Huang rubbed the space between his eyebrows as he looked at the piglet under the tree. He had a slight headache. It was just a month of appreciation, and this little pig also came to join in the fun. For the past few days, he had been trying to get rid of the pig, but he didn't expect the pig's nose to be more sensitive than a dog's. It could always find him. Piglet was panting and had a headache. Its master asked it to look after this patient, but it didn't expect this patient to be so restless. He ran around every day, causing it to use all kinds of martial arts to find him. It even lost weight. When was its master going to let it go back? It really didn't want to do this chore anymore. Ji and Huang faintly said, "Wang Kai, you go back to your room first. I'll be back in a bit." Wang Kai Piglet rolled its eyes at him and immediately sat down under the tree, using its actions to show its determination to follow Ji and Huang. Ji and Huang ignored it and sat down on the tree branch. Out of nowhere, he took out a wine gourd and drank wine while facing the bright moon. This wine was not an ordinary wine. It was spiritual wine. It was filled with spiritual energy and was extremely helpful for the recovery of his psychokinesis. His white robes fluttered in the wind, and the silver moonlight flowed on his body. Chapter 2378. His white robes fluttered in the wind, and the silver moonlight flowed on his body. The wine gourd in his hand made him look even more unruly. Under the moonlight, he was as handsome as a god. Wang Kai looked at the person on the tree and felt a little envious. "It seems like you have recovered quite well." A clear and cold voice flowed into Ji Yunhuang's heart along with the moonlight. His heart moved, and he looked down at the tree. Tian Xueqing was still wearing her green robes. Her green muslin skirt fluttered in the wind, and her clear eyes rippled with the moonlight. At this moment, Tian Xueqing was quietly looking at him with a hint of disapproval in her eyes. Wang Kai Piglet leaned against its master and felt a lot more confident. It added fuel to the fire and said, "That's right, master. He hasn't been recuperating these past few days and has been running all over the place," causing Wang Kai to follow him. The piglet rambled on for a long time. However, Ji and Wang's attention was completely focused on Tian Xueqing. He resisted the urge to go down and hug her and said, "The moonlight is just right. Miss Ah Ching, do you want to come up and admire the moon together?" Before Tian Xueqing could say anything, Wang Kai Piglet was the first to object. It hugged Tian Xueqing's calf with its front hooves and said earnestly, "Master, you must not go up. This is definitely his scheme. A few days ago, he was still trying to get your name out." Ji and Huang wanted to kick this light bulb pig away, but he couldn't do that. Thus, he went with the flow and said, "I did ask for Miss Ah Ching's name, but it was only to know the name of my benefactor and remember in my heart. Other than that, I don't have any other intentions." Actually, it was just a name. It didn't matter if she told him, but she still didn't know his name. Instead, he asked for her name first, which made her a little unhappy. Tian Xueqing tilted her head and looked at him. "Before asking for my name, shouldn't I tell you my name first?" Ji and Huang flew down. His figure was light and graceful. He cupped his hands towards Tian Xueqing. "Vast Sky Empire, Ji and Huang." Tian Xueqing's eyes darkened. She clearly remembered that when they first met, he called himself Yun. She said indifferently, "Ah, Ching, nice to meet you." Ji and Huang was slightly stunned. She still wasn't willing to tell him her full name. "May I ask what Miss Ah Ching's full name is?" He was unyielding. The corners of Tian Xueqing's lips curled up slightly, as if she was smiling yet not smiling. "A name is just a code name. Why must you get to the bottom of it? I'll call you Young Master Yin, and you can just call me Ah Ching." When Ji and Huang heard her words, he realized where the problem was. "Ah Ching, my previous name," Tian Xueqing interrupted him and said in a calm voice, "It's human nature." "Young Master Ji, you don't have to explain." This was indeed human nature. One must always be on guard against others. When Ji and Huang was saved by Ah Ching, he couldn't even see Ah Ching's face clearly. At that time, how could he tell her his real name? Ah Ching also knew nothing about this patient, so she only told him Ah Ching. Ji and Huang paused for a moment, but in the end, he did not say anything. He didn't regret telling Ah Ching that he had lied to her, because he wanted to get along with her properly without any reservations. Although he hadn't checked her soul root, his sixth sense told him that she was Tian Xueqing. Tian Xueqing sized up Ji Yun Huang and finally revealed a smile on her face. I see that young Master Ji has completely recovered. You can leave the mountain tomorrow. However, Chapter 2379. She took out a long receipt from her clothes, and her smile deepened. This is the list of the medicinal herbs that I have used for you these past few days. Before young Master Ji goes down the mountain, you must first settle the bill. Ji Yun Huang took the receipt and glanced at the numbers on the receipt. He felt that it was slightly funny. The prices of the medicinal herbs on the receipt were twice as expensive as usual. Was this her revenge for him taking advantage of her? He did not expect her to be a little money grubber. No wonder she gave her pet the name Wang Kai. Ji Yun Huang looked at Ah Ching with a smile that was not a smile. His gaze was filled with deep meaning. His voice carried a hint of laziness and devilishness as he said, "This bill, I will return it to you with interest." This sentence had a double meaning, especially the smile on his face. It made Tian Xueqing's heart feel even more alarmed. He was teasing her again. This person looked cold and noble on the outside, but she did not expect him to be so two-faced on the inside. Tian Xueqing was so angry that her face turned slightly red, but it was not very obvious in the dark. She coughed lightly as if she did not hear anything. She said in a business-like tone, "Then you can return it to me tomorrow before you go down the mountain." Ji Yun Huang's eyesight was astonishing, so he naturally saw her slightly red face. His heart suddenly had a mischievous thought. He deliberately sighed and helplessly said, "But I don't have any money on me." Tian Xueqing could not help but widen her eyes. Her voice was somewhat angry. "What? You want to renege on your debt?" When she said that she wanted the consultation fee, this person did not seem to care at all. She thought that he was a fat sheep, but she did not expect him to be someone who wanted to eat and dash. Wang Kai also jumped up and shouted, "How can you not have any money? Look at the clothes you are wearing. They are not ordinary goods. If you dare to renege on your debt, see if I don't electrocute you to death." Ji Yun Huang looked at Tian Xueqing's angry little face and was slightly stunned. In his previous life, he had never seen such a rich expression on Tian Xueqing's face. She always had an indifferent expression, as if she did not care about anything. In this life, he was very happy that she finally had more of a human's aura. Ji Yun Huang looked at Ah Ching, his brain working at high speed. He sighed and said faintly, "I made a mistake and escaped from my family. My family has already removed my name, so I can only rely on myself. A few days ago, someone wanted the skin of a cloud-swallowing beast. After I accepted the mission, I went to look for the cloud-swallowing beast, but I didn't expect to suffer from chi deviation and almost lose my life. Luckily, Miss Ah Ching saved me in time." So he had no money? Wang Kai felt a little dizzy, and Tian Xueqing was also a little dazed. Her medicinal herbs were all very rare and expensive. Now, she was going to lose everything. Wang Kai was so angry that it turned pink. It glared at Ji Yun Huang without saying a word. Ji Yun Huang's attention had always been on Tian Xueqing, so he naturally did not miss the heartache and unwillingness that flashed across her face. He found it funny and stared at Tian Xueqing for a while. He liked to see her so lively and full of emotions. In the past, when she had just started following him, she also had all kinds of emotions. When she was wronged, she would cry. When she was happy, she would laugh. Her entire heart was filled with him, but he ignored it at that time. The cold treatment he gave her made her become more and more indifferent, colder and colder. The two of them treated each other like ice, until the moment when they could no longer return. After she disappeared, he had thought countless times about how he would treat her if he could start over again. Now that he finally had the chance to start over again, he must grab hold of this opportunity. Chapter 2380. Tian Xueqing did not know what was going on in his heart. She only cared about what she cared about. She glared at him and said, "So you don't intend to pay me back?" It was about time. Ji Yanhuang's lips curled up slightly before he said with a serious expression, Miss Ah Ching has saved my life. How could I let you down? Naturally, I can't go back on my words, but I really don't have a single cent. How about this? How about we change the way we repay the debt? Change the way? Tian Xueqing's eyes were filled with doubt. She subconsciously asked, change the way? How? Ji Yanhuang smiled faintly. I am quite knowledgeable. How about I help Miss Ah Ching to repay the debt? There are so many patients here. I'm afraid Miss Ah Ching won't be able to handle them alone. Furthermore, some of the symptoms. Miss Ah Ching won't be able to help you, right? At this point, Ji Yanhuang finally revealed his purpose. From the moment he started to suspect that she was Tian Xueqing's reincarnation, he did not plan to leave. Even if he wanted to go back on his words, he wanted to stay here. He was already 99% sure that Ah Ching was Tian Xueqing. Now, he was just one step away from confirming her soul. However, he didn't plan to test her soul right away. That would scare her and be detrimental to the development of their relationship in the future. He might as well stay here and spend every day with her to cultivate their relationship. When the time was right, he would hug her. Moreover, Ah Ching had a lot of peach blossoms. He wanted to stay on this mountain and break them one by one. Ji Yunhuang's little abacus crackled in his heart. However, he still had a sincere expression on his face, as if he was thinking for Ah Ching's sake. Keep him as her assistant? Tian Xueqing frowned. She remembered the scene when he hugged her tightly that day. Alarm bells rang in her heart. Just as she was about to refuse, Ji Yanhuang spoke first. His eyes were filled with sincerity and guilt. That day, I let Miss Ah Ching down. I hope Miss Ah Ching can forgive me. I swear that I will never mistake Miss Ah Ching for anyone else. Towards Miss Ah Ching, I will scrupulously abide by my duty and etiquette. Ji Yanhuang solemnly swore as he silently added more words to his words. Ji Yanhuang spoke with such sincerity and sincerity. He even apologized and swore an oath. Tian Xueqing was moved. She couldn't possibly let her money go to waste, right? She paused for a moment before saying, All right then, you can stay. You owe me a total of 1,000 taels of silver. Normally, when you hire a doctor, you'll need 2 taels of silver per month. After Tian Xueqing said this, she calculated in her heart. Ji Yanhuang would have to stay here for 500 months before he could repay the debt. That's more than 40 years. She clenched her small fists, her small face flushed red with anger. No, it's a loss. What loss? Even if he sold him as a slave, it wouldn't be enough. Back then, she had thought that this person was definitely very rich when she saw his noble aura. Therefore, she had used the best medicine, the most expensive one. It was the most effective. Who would have thought that this person was a candle head with a silver spear? He was actually penniless. She had simply lost everything she had invested. She was afraid that she would lose half of the little treasury that she had painstakingly saved up. Prodigal, prodigal. The more Tian Xueqing thought about it, the more she felt that she was at a loss. Her heart became more and more vexed. She looked at Ji Yunhuang's robe with hope. Don't you have any other valuable things on you? I can help you pawn them off. His robe looked very valuable. Then he must have other valuable things on him, right? Chapter 2381. Ji Yanhuang helplessly sighed. Yes, Tian Xueqing's eyes lit up. Then take it out. I'll pawn it for you. If you can't bear to part with it, you can redeem it when you're rich. Ji Yanhuang saw Tian Xueqing's expression and felt that it was funny. He realized that he liked to bully her more and more. He sighed again. His expression was sorrowful, as if he could not bear to think about the past. But I pawned everything on the way out. Now, I only have one robe left. Miss Ah Ching, you will not even leave a robe for me, right? Tian Xueqing's mood had never fluctuated so much before. She did not believe it. She did not believe it. He must have something else on him. He was not willing to hand it over. Tian Xueqing glanced at Ji Yanhuang and tried her best to remain calm. It's not up to you to decide whether or not there is one. Wang Kai, search for me. In the end, her calmness was broken, and she was gnashing her teeth in anger. Ji and Huang, on the other hand, had a calm expression. Since Miss Ah Ching does not believe me, then search me. Wang Kai jumped up and down as it searched Ji and Huang's body. Ji and Huang cooperated and did not resist at all. Wang Kai had never searched so carefully before. It searched inch by inch. It used all its energy to search countless times, but in the end, it found that there was really nothing there. Wang Kai, who returned empty-handed, was in a bad mood. It was dejected and its ears drooped. Tian Xueqing looked at Wang Kai and knew the result. She was so angry that her face turned green. Ji and Huang sighed more than usual tonight. He said apologetically, "Miss Ah Ching, I'm sorry. However, I will be your assistant." Tian Xueqing took a deep breath and took another deep breath. In the end, she found that she could not suppress the irritation in her body. In the end, she could not hold back anymore. She clenched her teeth and said to Ji and Huang, "Fine, you stay. I will make sure that the money I spent is worth it." Ji and Huang still had a sincere look on his face. He bowed slightly. "It's my honor." Tian Xueqing flicked her sleeves and left. Her voice could be heard in the wind. "Wang Kai, follow me." Wang Kai Piglet followed him eagerly. The man and the pet walked away, leaving him standing there alone. The night wind blew, and Ji and Huang's plain white robe fluttered in the wind. The silver patterns on his robe slowly flowed under the moonlight, and his temperament was cold and noble. He stood there for a long time, watching the figure leave. The corners of his lips curled up slightly, revealing a faint smile. "Xueqing, it's my fortune to be able to see you again." The door to Ji and Huang's room was suddenly slammed open, and a pink little pig barged in. Ji and Huang slowly opened his eyes. His cold expression instantly disappeared when he saw the person behind Piglet. He revealed a faint smile. "Miss Ah Ching." After a night, Tian Xueqing had calmed down quite a bit. However, when she saw the smiling Ji and Huang, she still felt a headache coming on. She controlled her emotions and said faintly, "Get up and change your clothes." Casually tossing a set of servants' clothes to him, Wang Kai Piglet tactfully picked up Ji Yun Huang's luxurious outer robe with its beak. Then, the man and his pet swaggered off. Ji Yun Huang. He actually dared to take away his robe so boldly and confidently. Then, he threw a set of servants' clothes to him. Didn't he say that he would be her assistant? The ancestors' grand disciple, Chong Kong Empire's crown prince, and the peerless genius Ji Yun Huang, who had always been calm and rational, was stunned for the first time. Chapter 2382. He sighed and resigned himself to picking up the clothes that he would never touch normally. He slowly put them on, opened the door, and walked out. Ji and Huang wore the servants' clothes and walked on the road. The maidservants on the side of the road were stunned at first. Then their faces all turned red. When did Tranquil Mountain have such a handsome and noble servant? It couldn't be helped that he was handsome. Even the servant's clothes made him look unruly and carefree, like an elegant young master. Ji and Huang's appearance directly increased the attractiveness of Tranquil Mountain servants. At this time, Ji and Huang deeply understood Tian Xueqing's words, "I will make my money well spent." He did not stay idle that day. He was ordered around by Tian Xueqing to sweep the floor, wipe the table, clean the study, grind the ink, tidy up the medicine box, collect herbs, and boil them. This girl really made the best use of everything and was risking her life to squeeze him dry. Ji and Huang felt angry and amused at the same time. However, when he saw Ah Ching pretending to be calm but secretly feeling happy, he felt that it was all worth it. To be able to see her clearly and feel her by his side, this was a scene that he could only dream of 100 years ago. Moreover, this kind of work was too easy for him. Sometimes, happiness was just that simple. Of course, Ji and Huang was not satisfied with just looking at her. In the future, he would take it step by step and make her his wife once again. After Ji and Huang completed the task that Tian Xueqing gave him, he once again knocked on the door and walked into her room. He was slightly startled. Tian Xueqing's room and her aura seemed to be different. In front of others, she was always cold and indifferent. She did not seem easy to get close to. At such a young age, she had a kind of domineering aura that made the patients under her extremely obedient. Her room's decorations were elegant and had a trace of childishness. The color of the room also leaned towards warmth. That Wang Kai pig lying on her bed looked extremely harmonious with her room. After all, it was still a child. Ji and Wang looked at himself. He was old. Fortunately, he still looked like he was in his 20s. Otherwise, if he stood in front of her again, he would feel ashamed. At this moment, Tian Xueqing was sitting beside a desk with one hand supporting her head. She was reading a medical book. When she saw Ji and Huang, a hint of surprise flashed across her face, but it soon disappeared. She lowered her head and continued to read her book. Pretending to be indifferent, she asked, "Is something the matter?" Ji Yinhuang forcefully retracted his gaze from her body and handed a white flower with a hint of blue to Tian Xueqing. "Miss Ah Qing, the matter has been settled. Do you want this flower?" Tian Xueqing's hand seemed to tremble slightly as she took the flowers. It was done so quickly. She hadn't even flipped through a few pages of the book yet, and he was already back? That way, he would have profited. Tian Xueqing coughed lightly and picked up the little flower. She looked at it carefully and then nodded. "Yes, it's the tearless flower." Ji and Huang continued to look at her. Then, "Does Miss Ah Qing have any other instructions?" He had clearly done everything for the whole day, but he did not seem to be in a sorry state. He still looked like a noble young master with fluttering sleeves. Tian Xueqing looked at him and racked her brain, but she could not think of any other tasks. In the end, she collapsed on the chair and waved her hand. "No, you've been tired for the whole day. Go and rest. I'll call you if there's anything else." Giving him different tasks was also very taxing on her brain. Chapter 2383. Rest? He was still far from reaching the point where he needed to rest. Moreover, to him, true rest was to take a good look at Tian Xueqing. With her by his side, he would feel at ease. Looking at Tian Xueqing, who was reading, Ji and Huang reached out and took the book from her hands. He casually glanced at it and suddenly asked, "Miss Ah Qing, when you were reading, you seem to have encountered something that you didn't understand?" After a pause, he turned the medical book over to Tian Xueqing and lightly tapped on a line of words. "Is it here?" Looking at the slender and white fingers on the medical book, Tian Xueqing was slightly stunned. How did he know? Although she didn't want to admit it, she really didn't understand this part. Tian Xueqing nodded her head, and a trace of curiosity appeared in her eyes. "How did you know?" Ji Yinhuang mysteriously smiled. "Probably because I can read minds?" He could read minds, and he could only read her mind. He knew what her every word and action meant. There was no other reason. It was because he had recalled her appearance countless times in his memories. Her voice and her smile. Tian Xueqing was stunned at first. She looked at him from head to toe and then shook her head. Her clear eyes were filled with disbelief as she seriously said, "You are lying to me." Ji Yinhuang straightforwardly placed the book on the desk. This sentence should be understood like this. Tian Xueqing was a good child with a strong thirst for knowledge. Her attention was immediately diverted as she listened to Ji Yinhuang's explanation. "All right, do you understand now?" Ji Yinhuang tilted his head and looked at her. Tian Xueqing nodded her head. The doubts that had troubled her for a long time had been solved. She only felt comfortable in her heart and revealed a smile. She turned her head and was about to say something when she suddenly froze. Unknowingly, the two of them were already very close to each other. When Tian Xueqing turned her head, she just happened to fall into Ji Yinhuang's deep eyes. He looked at her with a smile that wasn't a smile, and a strange light flashed in his eyes. Tian Xueqing could almost see her own helplessness in Ji Yinhuang's eyes. His breath was right next to her ear, and her sensitive earlobe was as red as coral. This was the first time she had been so close to a man other than her master. She subconsciously wanted to push him away, but he seemed to have a magical power that made her body freeze. She stared at him with her round eyes, forgetting to react for a moment. Ji Yinhuang's eyes darkened as he spoke in a voice as deep as a cello. "Lady Ah Qing, If you continue to look at me like that, I might just kiss you. Tian Xueqing finally reacted, and her small face turned pink. She suddenly leaned back, wanted to put some distance between them. However, she didn't expect that she would use too much force and the chair would flip over. Just as she was about to fall head first, Tian Xueqing's vision blurred. Then her entire body was pulled by a strong force. She fiercely crashed into Ji Yunhuang's embrace. The memories of that day were once again awakened. She was filled with his cold and delicate fragrance. Her nose just happened to bump into his chest. Heavens, his chest was really hard. Her nose was sore from the collision. Tears welled up uncontrollably and swirled in her eyes. Ji Yunhuang took the opportunity to hug her and gently patted Tian Xueqing's back as if he was coaxing a child. He softly said, "Don't cry." Tian Xueqing suddenly pulled away from him. She only felt embarrassed and angry. However, her nose was still extremely sore, and tears once again rolled down her cheeks. This was so embarrassing. She angrily glared at him with tears still swirling in her eyes. Chapter 2384. Looking at her tear-stained face, Ji Yunhuang's heart ached. How long had it been since he last saw her cry? Once upon a time, he had turned a blind eye to her cries. By the time he subconsciously wanted to see her true emotions, she had already become an ice beauty without any desires. No matter what he did, he would never be able to obtain even a single tear from her. So, she could cry as well. So, she was once so delicate and naive. A tear in his heart seemed to be slowly torn open by a pair of hands. He subconsciously used his hand to wipe away her tears. The delicate skin under his fingers fascinated him, and he almost could not bear to move his hand away. He almost used all of his self-control to control himself and then moved his hand away as if nothing had happened. He patted Tian Xueqing's head. His voice was as indifferent as before, but if one listened carefully, one could hear a hint of hoarseness in his voice. "All right, Ah Qing, you read the book by yourself. I'm going to rest. If there's anything, just call me." Without waiting for Tian Xueqing to speak, he turned and left. The self-control that he was so proud of was on the verge of collapse. If he stayed any longer, he was afraid that he would turn into a wolf and pounce on her. "Take it slow. Take it slow." Tian Xueqing heard his words and felt that something was wrong. From his tone, why did it sound like she was the one who insisted on him accompanying her to read the book? It was obviously him who insisted on reading the book with her. Tian Xueqing sat on the chair. Her thoughts were in a mess, and she did not know what to think. After a long time, she suddenly reacted. Did he just take advantage of her? Furthermore, he took advantage of her and ran away before she could react. This bastard. Tian Xueqing's small face turned red from anger. Ding-ling-ling, ding-ling-ling. The crisp sound of the bell rang and interrupted Tian Xueqing's thoughts. She looked at the silver bell that was ringing nonstop and slightly frowned. At the same time, a little maid dressed in pink ran in. Miss, quickly go and take a look at the patient in Heavenly Fragrance Court. His condition seems to have worsened." Worsened? Wasn't he almost fully recovered yesterday? Temporarily suppressing these doubts, Tian Xueqing calmly said, "Fen Shui, bring my medicine box." She stood up and walked out of the room. Her pace was very fast, but it looked like she was taking a leisurely stroll. Her figure was graceful, and her green muslin robe was slightly fluttering in the wind. Even her black hair was fluttering in the wind, making her look like a green butterfly flapping its wings. When she passed by Jinx Sinuan, Tian Xueqing paused her footsteps and subconsciously took a look inside. No one. Just as she was feeling puzzled, she suddenly felt a light pat on her shoulder. She turned her head and saw Ji Yunhuang's handsome face. The corner of her mouth hooked up into a smile. "Ah Qing, are you looking for me?" Tian Xueqing was shocked, but she quickly adjusted herself. She had no time to ask him where he had been. She grabbed his hand and quickly explained as she walked, "Follow me. The patient in Tianxiang Court has suddenly deteriorated. Aren't you going to help me?" Ji and Wang allowed her to pull him forward. He lowered his head to look at their tightly clasped hands. They looked rather harmonious. The smile on his lips deepened. Tian Xueqing inadvertently saw his smile. At first, she was puzzled. Then, she suddenly realized something and let go of his hand. She was both embarrassed and shocked. Why did she take the initiative to hold his hand and walk forward? In this life, Tian Xueqing did not have the thought that men and women should not touch each other. She was a physician and had treated countless patients. If she had this kind of thought, she would not want to be a physician. What shocked her was that she actually took the initiative to hold someone's hand. Chapter 2385. She was shocked that she had actually taken the initiative to hold someone's hand. This was something that had never happened before. She had a cold temperament and did not like to have too much physical contact with others. When she was treating a patient, she would not touch anyone unless it was absolutely necessary. But now, she had actually held Ji Yunhuang's hand so naturally. What was wrong with her? Ji Yunhuang looked at his empty palm, and a sense of disappointment rose in his heart. His eyes darkened as he reached out to grab Tian Xueqing's hand and pulled her into his embrace. Before she could say anything, he had already used his lightness skill to fly into the distance. As he flew, he explained with a serious expression, "This is faster." Tian Xueqing was speechless. She subconsciously wanted to push him away, but just as she moved, Ji Yunhuang's body swayed in the air, and his helpless voice sounded, "Ah Qing, don't move. Be careful not to fall." Tian Xueqing looked down. It was so high. She hugged Ji Yunhuang's waist tightly and obediently stopped moving. Her expression was still indifferent, but there was a hint of nervousness in her eyes. Ji Yunhuang held her waist with one hand and patted her head with the other. He gently comforted her. "Don't be nervous. Relax." Tian Xueqing's face turned pale when she was suddenly patted in the head. She hugged Ji Yunhuang even tighter and said with a trembling voice, "Don't move." It seemed like she was really scared. Thus, he swayed in the air again and felt satisfied when Tian Xueqing hugged him even tighter. Ji Yunhuang carried Tian Xueqing and landed in Heavenly Fragrance Court. The maidservant at the door immediately cried and ran over. "Miss Ah Qing, please take a look at our young master." It seemed to be very serious. Tian Xueqing's expression darkened. She carried the medicine box and followed the maidservant into the room. Ji Yunhuang's footsteps paused for a moment, and he looked at the door with a meaningful expression. The atmosphere in this courtyard seemed to be a little strange. Soon after, he also entered the room. The door was closed, and the room was filled with a pungent fragrance. Tian Xueqing frowned and looked at the maidservant. Her voice was slightly cold. "What happened? Didn't I tell the patient to maintain good ventilation in the room and not to use incense?" The young maidservant said submissively, "I know all of this, but this is my master's request. Yesterday, he suddenly asked for incense and didn't allow me to open the doors and windows. I tried to persuade him, but he didn't listen." Tian Xueqing raised her eyebrows. In her impression, this young master Su did not like such strong incense. Why did he suddenly fall in love with fragrances after getting so sick? Ji Yunhuang's eyes flashed with a hint of contemplation. He suddenly asked for incense, and a strong one at that. It seems like he's trying to hide something. Tian Xueqing walked toward the big bed. Layers of curtains fell on the bed, blocking the view of outsiders. They could only vaguely see the silhouette of the person inside. Just as Tian Xueqing was about to pull the blanket away, Ji Yunhuang grabbed her hand and said, "Let me do it. It's not convenient for you." He glanced at her with a meaningful look in his eyes. Tian Xueqing was stunned for a moment, but she didn't say anything. Ji Yunhuang turned around and gave a brief order to the servant girl. "Open all the doors and windows in the room and extinguish the incense." The young maidservant was stunned for a moment and stammered, But my young master ordered." Chapter 2386. Ji Yunhuang lightly glanced at her, and with just a glance, the servant girl shut her mouth. She suddenly felt that the aura of this servant in front of her was frighteningly strong. When he lightly glanced at her, she felt her legs go soft. She did not dare to say anything else and agreed. Then, she opened all the doors and windows in the room and extinguished the incense. Fresh air instantly rushed in, and the pungent fragrance in the room finally faded a lot. Tian Xueqing's head had been hurting ever since she entered the room, but now that she breathed in the fresh air, her complexion slightly improved. As the air became more fresh, another smell that was hidden under the pungent fragrance slowly surfaced. A faint fishy smell, a faint snake smell came from the bed. Ji and Huang slowly pulled open the bed, and the scene inside the bed slowly revealed itself. Just as the person inside the bed was about to be revealed, that person suddenly sat up straight and strangely laughed twice. Then, he grabbed Ji and Huang. Ji and Huang was already prepared. His body slightly tilted, and he dodged. At the same time, he completely pulled open the bed. Tian Xueqing was stunned. The servant girl screamed and covered her mouth tightly, tears rolling down from her eyes. That person still had the face of young Master Su, and he was wearing a beautiful robe. What used to be his legs was now a long tail with a barb. Under the light, the barb flashed with an ice-cold green luster. With one look, one could tell that it was highly poisonous. Young Master Su coldly stared straight at Ji and Huang, releasing his killing intent without holding back. "Young Master, is that you?" the young maidservant asked in a trembling voice. In response, young Master Su coldly smiled. That smile was strange, and his mouth split open all the way to his ears, revealing a bloody mouth. The servant girl was so frightened that she retreated a few steps. She fell to the ground and muttered, "You are not my young master. You are not." At this time, Ji and Huang and young Master Su were already entangled in a fight. Wherever the two of them went, there would be a mess. The servant girl was extremely frightened and wanted to find a companion. She staggered and ran towards Tian Xueqing. Tian Xueqing looked at young Master Su's scarlet mouth and felt her whole body turn cold. She had never encountered such a strange situation. Yesterday, he was still a person, and today, he had turned into a snake. However, she quickly calmed down. She asked the young servant girl, "After I left yesterday, did your young master do anything wrong?" Before Tian Xueqing left, she was certain that young Master Su was fine and that his injuries were about to recover. When she was an arm's length away from Tian Xueqing, a bright light suddenly flashed in front of her eyes. A transparent barrier enveloped her entire body. She was stunned. When she looked at Tian Xueqing, she discovered that she was also enveloped by a spherical barrier. Ji and Huang skillfully fought with young Master Su while explaining, "The two of you don't even have the strength to truss up a chicken. This is a barrier that protects you from outside, but not inside. It can protect you from external harm, so don't come out." The maidservant was stunned. As if she was curious, she reached out her hand to touch the barrier, but she did not expect that her hand would pass through it directly. She was almost hit by young Master Su's tail. She quickly retracted her hand and stayed inside obediently. She looked at her non-human young master and replied with tears in her eyes, "Miss Ah Ching, after you left, my young master walked around and felt that his injuries had healed." Chapter 2387. She replied with tears in her eyes, "Miss Ah Ching, after you left, my family's young master walked around and found that his injuries were healed. Just as I was feeling happy for him, he suddenly fell to the ground. I was terrified and wanted to pull the bell, but the young master suddenly woke up. He smiled at me and then gently told me to close the door and windows and then use a strong incense. The young master has never been so gentle to me before, but I still remembered Miss' words and told him not to use incense. The moment I tried to persuade the young master immediately turned cold. I was so scared that I didn't dare to move. The young master suddenly smiled and told me again. This servant didn't dare to disobey and followed the young master's instructions. Tian Xueqing fell into deep thought. According to this servant girl's description, Something was wrong with young Master Su after she left. Then, why did the servant girl wait until today to pull the bell? Young Master Su suddenly swung his tail and hit the servant girl's barrier. The servant girl was so frightened that she squatted down and covered her head. Ji Yunhuang glanced at the servant girl, and a trace of deep thought flashed through his eyes. Tian Shueching asked again, "Then why did you wait until today to pull the bell for help?" The servant girl trembled in the barrier for a while before she recovered. She looked at young Master Su with eyes full of fear and disgust. When she heard Tian Shueching's words, she seemed to be immersed in her memories. She slowly curled up into a ball and covered her head. Her voice sounded like she was about to cry. "Last night, when this servant was sleeping, I was woken up by a rustling sound. I also heard young Master Su's faint moans. When I wanted to go over, young Master Su loudly berated this servant not to go near him. When I was about to pull the bell for help, my vision suddenly blurred and I don't know what happened. When I woke up today, I hurriedly pulled the bell, and then you guys came." Tian Shueching's voice was still indifferent. In other words, from last night until now, we didn't really see young Master Su's face. The servant girl nodded with tears in her eyes. Tian Shueching raised her eyebrows and said in a low voice, "Then how did you know that your young master's condition had worsened?" The servant girl was stunned for a moment before she replied blankly, I heard young Master Su's moans last night, so I guessed that his condition had worsened." There was something wrong with this servant girl. Ji Yunhuang had already subdued young Master Su and trapped him in a corner. He sat opposite Tian Shueching and leisurely poured himself a cup of tea. The young maidservant glanced at the trapped young Master Su, who was baring his fangs and brandishing his claws. She was stunned for a moment and subconsciously asked, "You're just trapping him?" Ji Yunhuang raised his teacup and looked at her with a smile that was not a smile. "Oh, then what do you want? Kill your young master?" The young maidservant's face flushed red. She hurriedly said, He is no longer my young master. He is a snake spirit." Her voice was almost piercing to the ears. Ji Yunhuang remained calm and unhurried. "Oh, how do you know that he is no longer your young master?" The young maidservant looked at him strangely. "He has already become like this. How can he still be my young master?" Ji Yunhuang revealed a meaningful smile. "What if I say that he is still your family's young master?" The young maidservant blurted out, "Impossible. He doesn't even have consciousness now. He was now a monster. It can't be my young master." Ji Yunhuang looked at her with a playful gaze. "How did you know that he had lost his consciousness?" Chapter 2388. The young maidservant blinked her eyes and said in fear, "His eyes are filled with killing intent, and he hasn't said a single word from the beginning to the end. He's just killing, killing, killing. Quickly kill him. He's no longer my young master." Ugh. Ji Yunhuang turned the teacup in his hand and said indifferently, "You are right. He doesn't have any consciousness, but do you know why?" The atmosphere seemed a little strange. The little maid felt that something was wrong and started to move back. However, on the surface, she seemed to be very interested in Ji Yunhuang's topic and asked, "Why?" The teacup in Ji Yunhuang's hand fell to the ground, and the broken pieces scratched the little maid's face. Blood slowly flowed out. At the same time, he said softly, "Because he is being controlled." His voice was very soft, but when it fell on the little maid's heart, it was as heavy as a hammer. Who is controlling him? The little maid's voice trembled as she slowly moved her feet. Ji Yunhuang looked at her with a sharp gaze. "What do you think?" The little maid's expression changed. She suddenly turned around and ran towards the door. Just as she took a step, she bumped into the barrier. When she raised her head, she discovered that it was the barrier that Ji Yunhuang had used to protect her. She started to struggle with all her might and shouted, "What are you doing? Why are you trapping me?" Ji Yunhuang leisurely said, "Why are you running? Is it because you have a guilty conscience?" The little maid's pupils shrank. Then, she shook her head fiercely and refused to admit it. "What do you mean? Are you saying that I am controlling my young master? How is that possible? I am loyal to my young master. Moreover, you also said that I am a weak girl who doesn't even have the strength to trust a chicken. Tian Shueching suddenly said calmly, "The real mastermind is you. Don't pretend anymore." The little maid was stunned for a long time. Suddenly, she crazily bumped into the barrier, wanting to escape. However, Ji and Huang's barrier was too strong. Even after bumping for a long time, the barrier did not budge at all. It was as if it had grown there. She sat on the ground and looked at Tian Shueching with eyes full of hatred and confusion. "How did you see through it?" Tian Shueching blew on the tea and casually said, "I was just bluffing." The little maid almost exploded in anger. She couldn't wait to break out of the enchantment and bite her to vent her hatred. Tian Shueching slowly took a sip of tea and said faintly, "You have already exposed a lot of flaws. Don't you know that?" The young maidservant gritted her teeth. "What flaw?" Tian Shueching glanced at her and was a little worried about the snake demon's IQ. "First of all, what have you been doing since you woke up and rang the bell? If you were a normal maidservant, you would be worried about your master who was lying motionless on the bed. If you pulled back the curtain, young Master Su would definitely attack you like how he attacked us. However, you are still alive. Either young Master Su didn't attack you, or you didn't pull the curtain at all. Either way, you're very suspicious. Second, as soon as we arrived, young Master Su immediately attacked us. Don't you think it's too deliberate? What was his motive for attacking us? Want to eat people? Then why didn't he do anything to you before? Thirdly, and this is also the most suspicious part about you, young Master Su comes from an aristocratic family, and the rules in his residence are strict. As a servant, you keep saying, "Do you still need me to say more?" The young maid sat paralyzed on the ground, her eyes lifeless. Chapter 2389. Although Tian Shueching was young, she was very observant. Her logical ability was also very strong, and she was very sensible. Ji and Huang looked at Tian Shueching with admiration. She was indeed worthy of being the person he loved. She had been so outstanding since she was young. The little maid came back to her senses and smiled sadly. She said sadly, "Yes, I controlled him, but I just wanted to kill him. Kill him." Suddenly, a strong killing intent burst out from her body. Her body suddenly became bigger, and a green light flashed. A huge green snake that was dozens of meters long and as thick as a water bucket appeared in the barrier. It looked at Tian Shueching with its cold eyes. "But now it was all destroyed by you. It doesn't matter. I can kill you first, then kill him." Thousand-year-old snake demon. Following the appearance of this snake demon, the temperature in the room became lower and lower. It was obviously midsummer, but the room was as cold as winter. Everything in the room was quickly freezing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Tian Shueching's little face became more and more pale from the cold, and her hands and feet almost lost feeling. Ji and Huang's eyes darkened. With a wave of his hand, he added another barrier around Tian Shueching. After that, he stuffed something into Tian Shueching's bosom and said warmly, "Ah Qing, take this and step back." Tian Shueching looked at the thing in her bosom, and her eyes moved. It was a blue stone that was sparkling and translucent. There was a light flickering inside the stone, and waves of heat were sent into her body through the stone. Warm blue stone. She felt her body temperature rising little by little, and her hands and feet were no longer so cold. The room was as cold as winter. Only the place where she was warm. Ji and Huang stood with his sword in hand. The huge green snake suddenly spat out a mouthful of black fog in their direction, trying to obstruct his vision. Ji and Huang ignored it and went forward. This level of poisonous gas could not hurt him at all. After the huge snake spat out the poisonous gas, it broke the barrier and suddenly turned around, breaking through the window and quickly flying out. She knew from the beginning that she was not this person's opponent. Of the 36 stratagems, escape was the best stratagem. She quickly flew in the air and looked back a few times. Then, she sighed in relief. Fortunately, she ran fast enough and got rid of that person. Just as she was secretly rejoicing, a cold sword light flew over from afar. She couldn't dodge in time, and the sword light mercilessly cut her tail, causing blood to gush out instantly. She howled in pain and looked at the two people in front of her whose clothes fluttered as if they were out for a walk. Her vertical pupils gradually turned red. There was no way to escape. They could only fight to the death. It opened its bloody mouth and bit at the two of them. Ji and Huang placed Tian, Shi-etching on a cloud, and raised his hand to cast a few barriers on her. Only then did he stand up to face the enemy. Only now did Tian Shi-etching react. It was one thing for him to chase after the snake demon, but why did he have to carry her with him? There was nothing she could do to help. Her body moved a little, and the cloud beneath her trembled. Tian Shi-etching's entire body froze. Heavens, she was sitting alone on a cloud. It was soft and thin. Looking down, she felt a little dizzy. Only those who had reached heaven rank level 2 could fly on clouds and condense them into a solid form. Could it be that this person had already reached heaven rank? On this continent, those who could reach heaven rank were as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. With this person's ability, it should be easy for him to get 1,000 taels of silver, right? Why did he have to sell himself to repay the debt? Countless questions flashed through Tian Shi-etching's mind. Her body was stiff as she obediently sat on the cloud. She hugged the blue warm stone in her arms and silently watched the battle. Chapter 2390. Just like that, a man and a snake fought in the air. Although it was a fight, anyone with a discerning eye could see that the green python was not a match for the man in green. Blood spilled everywhere, dyeing the surrounding clouds red. From the sky to the ground, and back again, the battle soon came to an end. The green snake's body was badly mutilated, and a part of her tail was broken. She was lying on the ground powerlessly, and it was difficult for her to even raise her head. At this time, she had already reached her limit. Ji and Huang mercilessly raised his sword, preparing to slash down. At this time, Tian Shi-etching, who was standing at the side, suddenly said, "Wait." Ji and Huang was stunned. The green snake took the opportunity to desperately escape, but before she could get far, she was caught by Ji and Huang with the demon binding rope. The green snake was tied up by the demon binding rope, lying on the ground motionlessly. She hatefully said, "What do you want to do?" Tian Shi-etching sat on a cloud far away and calmly said, "Where is the original Mizukage?" Mizukage was the name of the little maid. The golden snake seemed to be stunned for a moment, and suddenly laughed. "I am the Mizukage. I became his slave in order to kill him." Tian Shi-etching was still indifferent. "You are not. Yesterday, before I left, you were the real Mizukage. Now, you just changed into her appearance. Where's the real Mizukage?" The green snake looked up to the sky and hissed. A green light flashed on her body, and a woman in green clothes sat there covered in blood. Her eyebrows were enchanting, and the mole at the corner of her eye added a bit of innocence to her. She laughed, and blood spurted out. "That bitch has already been eaten by me. Now, even if you cut open my stomach, you won't be able to find her. Ha 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 ha. She has already melted. Ha ha ha." She laughed crazily, but tears kept flowing out. Tian Shi-etching's eyes turned cold, and she no longer spoke. The green snake seemed to know that she was about to die. She laughed and said sarcastically, "You humans are the best at disguising, the best at disguising. I have seen through you, haha. In your eyes, it doesn't matter if humans do anything wrong to demons, but if demons want revenge, you don't ask for the reason. You use the banner of justice to kill us, and you still think that you represent justice. Ha ha! It's unfair. The heavens are unfair." The sword in Ji and Huang's hand paused for a moment. Green Snake cried out mournfully, "Make your move. Aren't you enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens? Do it." Ji and Huang moved his sword away and said indifferently, "I'll give you a chance to complain about your grievances." Green Snake was stunned and did not speak for a long time. After an unknown period of time, she said faintly, "Actually, I cultivated the immortal Tao in the beginning." Ji and Huang remained silent. From just now, he felt that this snake demon seemed to have a faint immortal aura. This was also why he decided to believe this snake this time. Green Snake looked at the white clouds floating in the distance. The light in her eyes grew dimmer and dimmer. There was an indescribable tiredness in her voice. I met him when he was seriously injured when I came down from the mountain. I saw that he was pitiful, so I saved him. Thus began an ill-fated relationship. After he woke up, he grabbed my hand and said that he fell in love with me at first sight and wanted to marry me. Of course, I refused and ran back to the forest in fear. But I didn't expect him to follow me. I didn't allow him to enter the mountain. So he waited at the foot of the mountain for 3 days and 3 nights. In the end, he fainted at the entrance of the valley. Chapter 2391. The Green Snake continued. I lived in the mountains and forests. Once I went out alone and met a wild wolf. He came out of nowhere and stood in front of me stupidly, saying that he would not allow the pack of wild wolves to hurt me. He definitely did not know that it was a piece of cake for me to deal with that pack of wolves. He was severely injured, and I stayed behind to treat his wounds. Those days were really good. He almost spoiled me to the heavens. Even if I wanted the moon in the sky, he would pluck it for me. He named me Inu because he liked the way I looked when I danced in a silver dress. Inu was a snake and did not care much about status. He treated her well, so she used all her love to reciprocate his kindness. Physical intimacy was a natural thing. When I was pregnant, he married me, but in the name of a concubine. He said that his mother did not agree to take me as his first wife, so he could only wrong me for a while. However, he would only love me forever and never marry anyone else. I did not care about status. I just wanted to be with him. Later, he changed. Everything changed. He married his first wife. He said that this was his mother's dying wish and that he could not be unfilial, so I agreed. On the night of their wedding night, I was next door and I clearly heard him tell that woman that he only loved her. I made a scene, but he slapped me. Then, he applied medicine for me with heartache and said that he and that woman were just putting on a show, each taking what he needed. I believed him. Inu laughed sarcastically. No matter what he said, I would believe him. It is not that I do not know some things, but I am afraid to think about them. What happened after that? Why did you degenerate into a demon? Tian Shueching asked. He was destined to face a calamity of death when he was 20 years old. I changed my fate against the heavens and degenerated into a demon. Inu explained calmly, but Tian Shueching could feel how dangerous that moment was. Changing one's fate against the heavens. The slightest mistake would have caused one's soul to dissipate. After I woke up, he treated me even better. I was also very satisfied with the birth of the child. Tian Shueching suddenly had a strong intuition that something must have happened on the day Inu was born. The child was born, and it was a human boy. I was so happy, but when I showed him, I found that his face was gloomy. Inu's big black and white eyes gradually became red, and her voice was full of strong hatred. After he held the child, he gave the child to that bitch Mizukage, and that bitch threw the child on the ground in front of me. My child. He had just been born and hadn't even opened his eyes to take a good look at the world before he was ordered to fall to his death by his father. How could he be so ruthless? How could he be so ruthless? The child was a human. He's innocent. Silver Feather's voice became more and more mournful, like a cuckoo, crying blood. He already knew that I was the snake immortal. He already knew. The day our snake immortal gave birth was when she was at her weakest. He specifically chose that moment to attack me. He stabbed me in the heart with a knife and dug out my inner core. He directly ate it. Ha ha ha. He's good to me. It's all for my inner core. Everything was an act. Ha ha. Everything was a disguise. It's all my wishful thinking. Ha ha. Tian Shueching felt her heart tighten, as if it was tightly clenched by a big hand. Looking at the crazy Inu, a trace of pity flashed through her eyes. He wanted immortality so much that he went crazy. At that time, I was simply delivering myself to his doorstep. Chapter 2392. He was so obsessed with immortality that he almost lost his mind. At that time, I was practically delivering myself to his doorstep. However, no matter how much he thought about it, he forgot that I had fallen to become a demon. My immortal core had turned into a demon core, and the demon core was extremely poisonous. Even if he swapped my blood with his when he changed his fate, it only delayed the effects of the poison. In less than 2 hours, he would have died from the poison. Inu chuckled as if she was a child who had taken advantage of someone else. She laughed until her face was full of tears, but she did not realize it. When she was done laughing, she said slowly, "However, I never thought that you would be able to cure him." In less than 2 hours, the poison in his body was suppressed. Tian Xueqing did not speak. Treating people was her duty as a doctor. However, she did not expect that she would save such a crazy person. My child is dead, and my inner core has been dug out. Why are they still alive? Why? I can't accept this. I can't accept this. Tears of blood flowed down Silver Feather's face. She said unconsciously, "But I was too injured. I couldn't do anything to them. I could only watch him get better day by day. He was flirting with that bitch who killed my child. Yesterday, I barely recovered from my injuries, so I came to take revenge. I tore that bitch apart and used the snake's soul to slowly erode him, making him suffer a fate worse than death. In the end, he became my puppet. Do you know that he was tortured for a day and a night? Ha ha! I took revenge for my son." Inu was crying and laughing at the same time. She told the whole story incoherently. I didn't expect that after he was controlled, he still had a trace of consciousness left. He pulled the bell with all his might. I wanted to kill him immediately, but after thinking about it, I decided to kill him all at once. It turned out that the person who pulled the bell was not a servant girl, but young Master Su, who was on the verge of losing his consciousness. Telling this story seemed to have used up all of Inyu's energy. She weakly fell to the ground, her breath weak. Actually, I was going to die anyway, without the inner core. Previously, revenge kept me alive, but now, I've taken my revenge. I can rest in peace. My child. Inu slowly closed her eyes. A drop of blood slowly flowed down her cheeks. Tian Xueqing sat on the ground, feeling cold all over. She lived deep in the mountains and was young. Although she had treated countless people, she had never been involved in worldly affairs. She didn't expect there to be such a tragic story in the human world. When he first heard this, the shock in his heart could be imagined. Ji Yanhuang's face was also pale. He seemed to have been touched by something as he clenched his fists tightly. Tian Xueqing's experience was similar to Inyu's, but he was not as bad as young Master Su. This man is too despicable. How could he bear to treat a woman who treated him so well like this? If I had known earlier, I would have let him die from the poison. Even if he dies 10,000 times, it won't be too much. Tian Xueqing's tone was filled with hatred. Ji Yanhuang's face turned even paler. He paused for a moment before saying, "Ah Qing, if this young Master Su didn't intentionally use this Inu, but he did use her to marry her. After that, he treated other women well and often treated Inu badly. In the end, he caused Inu's tragic death. Do you think that Inu would forgive young Master Su if she was reborn?" His analogy could be said to be evasive. Tian Xueqing's heart was filled with anger, so she did not really understand the meaning behind Ji Yanhuang's words. Chapter 2393. His analogy could be said to be evasive. Tian Xueqing was filled with anger and did not really understand the meaning behind Ji Yanhuang's words. She replied without hesitation, "Of course not. If I were Inu, I would stay far away from him after being reborn. It would be best if we never met again." Ji Yanhuang. After Tian Xueqing finished speaking, she inadvertently raised her head and saw that Ji Yanhuang's expression was not right. She was a little surprised. "What happened to you?" Ji Yanhuang suddenly woke up. Looking at her clear eyes, he did not know what to feel. He slightly shook his head. "I'm fine. I probably used too much strength during the fight just now." Tian Xueqing was finally relieved. Looking at Inu on the ground, she asked, "Is she dead?" Ji Yanhuang softly replied, "Yes." Seeing that Tian Shueching was still staring blankly at Inyu's corpse, he slightly frowned. With a flick of his finger, a ball of fire flew towards Inyu's corpse. With a bang, it started burning. As the fire burned, Inyu's face was peaceful, as if she was in a deep sleep. However, Tian Shueching knew that this enchanting, pure, and innocent snake immortal had already died with wounds all over her body. Whether it was her body or her heart, she was completely dead. Inyu's silver-white clothes fluttered in the fire like a butterfly, beautifully dancing in the fire. A blood-red spirit slowly rose from Inyu's corpse. A resentful spirit. A resentful spirit with strong resentment. It was a spirit that could not be purified and could only be scattered. Ji Yanhuang's hand silently bent. Tian Shueching closed her eyes and muttered something. She slightly raised one of her hands, and a faint white light was emitted from her soft and fair fingertips, shining on the crimson, resentful spirit. The moment the white light enveloped it, the crimson, resentful spirit struggled and screamed. Then it suddenly stopped struggling and looked at the gentle white light in confusion. Being enveloped by the white light, the expected pain did not come. Instead, it felt endless sleep and peace. The color of its body started to fade little by little. Ji Yanhuang looked at Tian Shueching, and a hint of surprise flashed across his eyes. She could actually purify spirits? Tian Shueching's forehead was slightly sweaty, and her brows were slightly wrinkled. She could not hold on any longer. Seeing this, Ji Yanhuang flicked his finger, and a ball of golden light enveloped Tian Shueching. Tian Shueching's brows gradually softened. Under the white light, the vengeful spirit slowly faded and became a pure white soul. Tian Shueching waved her hand lightly, and the pure white soul flew over hesitantly, landing in Tian Shueching's palm. An ethereal and slightly naive voice sounded, "Thank you." After a pause, it added, "I'm sorry." She had once wanted to kill Tian Shueching, but she did not expect Tian Shueching to repay her evil with kindness and release her from purgatory. Tian Shueching raised her hand and said, "Go. I hope you can meet the right person in your next life." The pure white soul slowly flew into the air and became fainter and fainter. Just as it was about to fade into a shadow, it turned back and suddenly said, "Cherish the person in front of you." It was unknown who it was talking to. After saying this, she completely disappeared from the world. Ji Yanhuang carried Tian Shueching and flew back to her quiet spiritual courtyard. As for young Master Su's life and death, without Tian Shueching's help, he would die in extreme pain within 2 hours. Tian Shueching was also straightforward. The moment she landed, she immediately broke free from Ji Yanhuang's embrace and ordered, "Throw that young Master Su out." Chapter 2394. Ji Yanhuang rubbed his brows. "I'll throw him away later. Don't let him bite anyone." He would deal with that person cleanly and guarantee that he would not cause any trouble for Qing. Tian Shueching thought about it, and was about to say something when she suddenly saw Fen Shui running over. Tian Shueching looked at the flustered Fen Shui and frowned. "Fen Shui, what's wrong? Why are you running?" Fen Shui gasped for breath and lowered her head. After a long time, she finally said, "Master! Master is back." Tian Shueching's eyes lit up, and her voice was filled with unconcealable joy. "What did you say? Master is back. Where is he now?" Ji Yanhuang stood at the side, and his eyes slightly darkened. He had been with Tian Shueching for so long, but he had never seen her so excited. Fen Shui finally gasped for breath and raised her head. Her face was filled with nervousness and helplessness. She looked at Tian Shueching as if she was looking at a life-saving straw. "Master is back, but he was poisoned. He was sent up by someone." Master was poisoned? Tian Shueching felt as if she was suddenly struck by lightning, and her body went soft. She anxiously said, Quickly bring me there." Fen Shui stumbled in front, and Ji Yanhuang suddenly asked, "Where is your master now?" Fen Shui was stunned and subconsciously replied, Master is at his usual place in the recuperation park, in the southeast corner in front. Before she could finish her words, Ji Yin Huang carried Tian Xueqing and flew towards the southeast. Fen Shui. Ji Yin Huang could feel that Tian Xueqing's body was slightly stiff and her hands and feet were slightly cold. Her eyes carried a trace of panic. He softly comforted her. Don't worry. Have more confidence in your medical skills. He had never seen Tian Xueqing so flustered, as if she had lost her backbone. Tian Xueqing's small face was pale. My master has a physique that is immune to poison. Logically speaking, he shouldn't have been poisoned. If he was poisoned, it could only be one of the 3 great poisons. Ji Yin Huang's heart sank. The 3 great poisons still had no cure. As soon as the 2 of them entered the house, they smelled a cold fragrance. A man in white was sitting on the bed. He had a handsome face, and his temperament was as gentle as jade. His white clothes were the most simple style, without any embellishments, but it made him look like a banished immortal. That person's lips were pale, and he looked a little weak as he leaned against the bed. When he saw Tian Xueqing running in, warmth flashed across his eyes. Although his voice was a little weak, it was still as warm as the spring breeze. Xueqing, master is back. After Tian Xueqing saw her weak master, there was no one else in her eyes. She plunged into Ji Mo's arms and buried her head in his chest. She said in a muffled voice, Master, you're finally back. As she spoke, she pressed her small head against Ji Mo's chest and closed her eyes to count his heartbeat. Then, she used her mind to check his pulse. GMO didn't stop her and let her lie on his body to feel his pulse. When Tian Xueqing raised her head, he asked with a smile, Xueqing, have you found out what kind of poison is in master? His tone was indifferent, as if he didn't take the matter of him being poisoned to heart. He even wanted to test Tian Xueqing. Tian Xueqing's small face was pale, and her hands were trembling. But looking at her calm master, she also slowly calmed down. She briefly and rationally analyzed the results of her pulse to her master and finally concluded, Master, you've been poisoned by the ice soul poison. Chapter 2395. The ice soul poison was one of the 3 great poisons. The poisoned person would gradually stiffen within 10 days. Even if it was summer, it would be of no help. From the skin to the inside, inch by inch, the person would be frozen to death, even in summer. GMO patted her head and smiled faintly. That's right, it's ice soul poison. Tian Xueqing grabbed GMO's sleeve with hope. Master, do you have a way to detoxify it? GMO muttered to himself for a moment, and then slowly said, When I was first poisoned, I didn't have a way to detoxify it. I could only slowly search for a way. I finally found a way, but it can only delay the onset of the poison. I can't completely detoxify it. Therefore, I came back this time to see if Xueqing has any good ideas. Tian Xueqing looked at her master with wide eyes. Even her master has no way. She desperately searched her mind, trying to find a good way to save her master. However, how could she find one in such a short time? She anxiously paced around the room. Because she was too anxious, sweat appeared on her forehead. Xueqing, I've taught you before that, as a doctor, you must not be impatient. The more serious the illness, the more you must be calm. Calm down and think slowly. GMO said in a deep voice. Tian Xueqing's heart trembled. She looked at her master, and GMO nodded slightly at her. She slightly closed her eyes and tried to calm down the chaotic emotions in her heart. After thinking for a moment, she secretly sighed. Disciple still doesn't have a specific method. Master, why don't you tell Disciple how you suppress the poison? From this perspective, I might be able to come up with a new idea. GMO nodded and began to tell Tian Xueqing his method of suppressing the poison. Tian Xueqing sat at the side and listened seriously. Occasionally, she would ask a question or two. GMO patiently answered her questions, a master and a disciple. One asked and one answered. The 2 of them got along very well. When Tian Xueqing threw herself into GMO's arms, GMO did not have any reaction. It was obvious that he was used to it. The two of them had a very close relationship. There was almost no room for a third person to come in between them. Ji and Huang had been standing there the whole time. He was usually the center of attention, but now he was like a shadow in the background. No one noticed his existence. That little girl's entire heart was filled with thoughts of her master. Ever since she entered this room, she hadn't even glanced at him once. Perhaps she had already forgotten about his existence. His face was slightly pale, and his thin lips were tightly pursed. He looked straight at the two people who were gathered together to discuss medicine. The two people were so intimate as if there was no one else around, and he felt that he was a little unnecessary. After all, he had been through a lot. From Tian Xueqing's interaction with GMO, he could tell that Tian Xueqing had feelings for GMO. He felt as if he had stepped into icy water, and his entire body was cold. When GMO raised his eyes, he inadvertently swept his gaze over the person standing in the shadows. He took a closer look and found that the figure was somewhat unfamiliar. His face was hidden in the darkness, and although he was wearing the clothes of a servant, there was still a natural air about him. GMO searched his mind for a long time, and once again confirmed that there was no such servant on his tranquil mountain. It wasn't that GMO had a good memory, but rather that it was hard to forget someone like Ji and Huang after seeing him once. GMO turned his head and asked, "You are?" Ji and Huang was in a daze, and for a moment, he didn't hear what this person said, so he didn't say anything. When he was quiet, he had a noble and cold aura. Chapter 2396. When he was calm, he had a noble and cold aura. He did not like to show his emotions, so at this moment, he looked somewhat cold, as if he disdained to answer Jimo's question. Tian Xueqing looked at him coldly. She did not want to see anyone disrespect her master. She faintly opened her mouth and said, "Master, he is a patient that I saved, because he didn't have enough money on him." Speaking up to this point, she paused for a moment and looked at Ji and Huang before continuing. "So he stayed behind to help me repay the debt. Now, he is just a servant, so you don't need to pay attention to him." Jimo's eyes flashed with a trace of deep thought, but he did not say anything. Ji and Huang's face slightly changed. He might ignore other people's words, but he would never ignore Tian Xueqing's. A servant was already, until now, he was just an unimportant servant in her heart. Previously, Tian Xueqing treated him as her sky and carefully brought everything she had to him. However, he abandoned her like a worn-out shoe and trampled on her sincerity. Now, she abandoned him like a worn-out shoe. He slightly closed his eyes. Was the wheel of fortune turning? And all of this was his own doing, so he could not blame anyone else according to his original temperament. He would have turned around and left after receiving such cold treatment. But now, even if everything in front of him was dazzling, he did not want to leave, as if his feet were nailed to the ground. At this moment, Tian Xueqing's thoughts were all on her master, so she did not notice Ji Yunhuang's depressed mood. She took his pulse and poured water for him. She was very attentive and busy like a little bee. Ji Yunhuang just stood there and watched, motionless like a piece of wood. He thought back to the time when he was sick. At that time, Tian Xueqing had just started following him. She didn't care if he was as cold as ice towards her. She would keep circling around him like this. He only had to look at her or say a few words to her, and her eyes would light up for an entire day. The past was gone with the smoke and could no longer be chased. That year, Tian Xueqing also died on that plateau. Because of him, now that she had been reborn, she no longer had any memories of him. In her eyes, he was just a servant. His heart began to ache again, and there was a sour feeling in it. His face became even paler, and his gaze towards Tian Xueqing became even deeper. "Your servant doesn't seem to be feeling well." GMO finally noticed him. This servant's face was abnormally pale. A doctor has the heart of a parent. This sentence is most deeply reflected in GMO. He is injured like this, but he still has the heart to pay attention to others. Tian Shuiching finally turned around and glanced at Ji Yanhuang. Are you not feeling well? Ji Yanhuang was stunned for a moment. He looked at her and nodded slightly. Subconsciously, he hoped that Tian Shuiching would also circle around him, even if it meant that she would give him some of her attention. He thought that Tian Shuiching would come over and check his pulse after he admitted that he was not feeling well. However, she just said, "If you're not feeling well, go back and rest. I will give you half a day off today." After she finished speaking, she began to circle around her master again. Ji Yanhuang took a light breath and secretly adjusted his emotions. He smiled and said, "It's fine. I can still hold on." He then looked at GMO and said, "I wonder if I can take your pulse?" GMO's gaze turned to him. "Do you know medicine?" Ji Yanhuang smiled. "I know a little." Chapter 2397. He had a kind of aura, and this kind of aura made people feel an inexplicable desire to submit to him. GMO extended his wrist. "Then I'll have to trouble you." Ji Yanhuang did not stand on ceremony. He sat in front of GMO's bed and immediately took his pulse. GMO looked at him and faintly felt that the person in front of him was not simple. GMO was different from Tian Shuiching. Tian Shuiching stayed in the Medicine Valley every day and only dealt with patients, so she was not in tune with the current situation. However, GMO had been wandering around for many years and naturally trained a pair of sharp eyes. After Ji Yanhuang finished taking his pulse, GMO asked, "How is it?" Ji Yanhuang's eyes were calm. "You're not suffering from the same poison." GMO's expression changed. He was indeed suffering from two types of poison. However, the eye soul poison was the most overbearing and the most fatal one. Although the other poison was not easy to cure, it was not fatal. Therefore, he did not care about it for the time being. He nodded in acknowledgement. Ji Yanhuang said, "Originally, the hallucinatory flower poison in your body was not fatal. However, once it combined with the eye soul poison, it would produce another type of poison." He spoke frankly with assurance. Even Tian Shuiching, who was deep in thought, was attracted by his words. When GMO finished listening, he could not help but clap his hands. "So you are also a medical grandmaster. I have neglected you. May I know your esteemed name?" Ji Yanhuang only said 3 words. Ji Yanhuang. GMO's body trembled. "Buddha Lotus Mountain's second master, Ji Yanhuang? I am ashamed." Ji Yanhuang did not deny it. GMO was stunned for a moment. "You have already cultivated an immortal body. What kind of injury did you suffer that my disciple could treat?" "I was careless and was injured by a cloud-swallowing beast. Fortunately, your disciple helped me. I also have to thank Teacher Ji for teaching such a good disciple." GMO looked at Ji Yanhuang with a complicated gaze. The current second master of Buddha Lotus Mountain owed someone money? Would he sell his body for a mere 1,000 taels of silver? He was the richest person in the world, okay? Tian Shuiching might not know, but GMO knew that the current monarch of Chong Kong country was trying his best to curry favor with his imperial uncle. He was thinking of ways to invite him back to be the state preceptor. He gave Ji Yanhuang all kinds of treasures. It could be said that as long as he crooked his finger, countless taels of silver would automatically run into his pocket. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was as rich as a country. Such a person would cause a sensation no matter where he went, but now he was serving as a servant in this small valley. What was his purpose? Some people didn't look like an emperor even when they wore a dragon robe, but this person looked like an emperor even when he wore a servant's outfit. GMO really wanted to chat more with Ji Yanhuang, but he had been poisoned too deeply. His mind was in a bad state, and after talking for a while, he felt dizzy. Although GMO had managed to slow down the effects of the poison, the eye-soul poison was slowly eroding his body. The only reason he had been able to hold on until now was because of his last breath. Now, he finally couldn't hold on any longer. He slumped onto the bed, white frost forming on his forehead. Tian Shuiching jumped in fright and touched her master's forehead. She called out to her master twice, but she didn't get any response. She panicked and couldn't help but shout angrily at Ji and Huang. My master is already so weak. Why are you chatting with him so much? She pushed Ji, Yin Huang away and busied herself around her master. Ji Yin Huang was pushed back a step by her, and his expression changed slightly. He pursed his lips and looked at Tian Xueqing, who was busying herself around GMO. He said in a deep voice, I have a way to alleviate the effects of the poison. Let me try. Tian Xueqing was so anxious that her forehead was covered in sweat. When she heard his words, she asked, What way? Chapter 2398. Ji and Huang did not beat around the bush. Cooperate with me. He began to quickly explain the precautions. Tian Xueqing's expression changed slightly. This method was considered unconventional in the medical field. If it was not done properly, the patient's life would be lost. She looked at Ji and Huang suspiciously. She was still young and impatient, so she spoke rashly. This method won't work, right? If it fails, my master's life will be gone. It might not matter to you, but to me, my master. She was interrupted by Ji and Huang before she could finish her sentence. If anything happens to your master because of this, I will pay with my life. Tian Xueqing was speechless. Ji and Huang pursed his lips and looked at her with a sharp gaze. Do you believe me now? Tian Xueqing's heart skipped a beat. She looked at her master. Jimo's complexion was getting worse and worse. His limbs and torso were covered in thin ice. She had already found a way to treat her master's poison, but she needed time. She still needed a whole day. How long can your method delay my master's death? 2 days. I can guarantee that he will be fine for 2 days. Tian Xueqing finally let out a sigh of relief. All right, we will use your method. Ji and Huang did not say anything. He immediately began to work while Tian Xueqing cooperated with him. Both of them were experts and cooperated very well. After working for a while, they finally forced the poison to Jimo's arm and temporarily stopped the spread of the poison. Tian Xueqing slowly walked out of the preservation garden. Ji and Huang followed beside her without saying a word. After a while, he suddenly asked in a low voice, Is your full name Xueqing? Tian Xueqing's mind was filled with her master's illness. She subconsciously replied, No, my full name is Tian Xueqing. Although he was already prepared, the moment he heard this name, Ji and Huang clenched his fists and his heart began to beat faster. Who gave you this name? Tian Xueqing looked at him as if she was surprised that he would ask such a question. However, she was not prepared to tell him the truth, so she changed the topic. She took out a blue stone from her bosom and shook it in her hand. Young Master Ji, as far as I know, a small piece of blue warm stone is worth thousands of gold taels. As for such a large piece, I'm afraid it's priceless, right? Ji and Huang was, after all, an old fox. From the moment she took out the blue stone, he knew that something was wrong. He immediately thought of an excuse. A friend lent it to me. I can't use it as collateral. Tian Xueqing said with a faint smile, Since your friend is so generous, I'm sure he won't mind redeeming you. Ji and Huang sighed. It's a pity that he died young. This stone became the only thing he left with me. Tian Xueqing took another deep breath and said, You're still the second in command of the Buddha Lotus Mountain, the #1 sect in the world. Ji and Huang once again cut her off. No matter how big the sect is, I'm still clean. Tian Xueqing. So no matter what, he had no money? Ji and Huang opened his mouth and asked, Your relationship with your master, has it always been this good? Looking at the interaction between Tian Xueqing and GMO, he felt a strong sense of crisis. It must be known that a relationship between a master and a disciple could also develop into a romantic relationship. For example, his Grandmaster Shenjuli and Ning Xiuma, Tian Xueqing nodded. It was my master who saved me. He even raised me up and taught me medicine. My master is the closest person to me in this world. Chapter 2399. Tian Xueqing nodded her head. It was master who saved me, raised me up, and taught me medicine. Master is the closest person to me in this world." As she said this, Tian Xueqing's eyes seemed to sparkle with starlight, and her eyes were astonishingly bright. Ji Yanhuang's heart sank. She used the word closest to her, not family. Looking at her bright eyes, his heart felt like it had been cut by a knife. She was so happy, but it was for another man. He took a light breath and said in a casual tone, "A teacher for a day, a father for life. You're naturally his closest family. He will treat you like a father." Tian Xueqing's eyes dimmed, and she said indifferently, "Xueqing does not have parents, so I don't know the kindness of my parents. I only know that Master is the person closest to me in this world. Even if I have to sacrifice my life, I will save him. If anything happens to him, I am afraid that I will not be able to live on." Ji Yanhuang was speechless. Tian Xueqing felt that the atmosphere around her was not right. She raised her head and saw Ji Yanhuang looking down at her. His gaze was extremely oppressive. His figure was tall and straight, and Tian Xueqing was not tall enough. She was suppressed by his invisible aura, causing her heart to palpitate. She subconsciously took a few steps back, creating a safe distance. She frowned slightly. What does this person want to do? His gaze is so strange. She was really on guard against him, and all of this was because he asked for it. She was still a child, so she did not know anything. Ji Yanhuang took a light breath and suppressed the tumultuous emotions in his heart. "Don't be afraid. I can help you. You are too tired today, so go back and rest first. If you need any herbs, you can tell me and I will help you pick them." Although he did not like GMO, since GMO was the most important person to Tian Xueqing, he had to save him. Tian Xueqing was now even more wary of him. She shook her head and said, "There is no need. These herbs are not easy to pick, and they can easily be mixed up with other herbs. I will do it myself." Ji Yanhuang's expression changed slightly. He looked at her and wanted to say something, but he could not. She did not believe him. Was she afraid that he would harm GMO? He did not say anything else, and only said, "Do as you wish." He turned and left. Tian Xueqing was taken aback for a moment before she subconsciously looked over. Ji Yanhuang's back was tall and straight. His robe fluttered in the wind, giving off a sense of bleakness. Tian Xueqing suddenly felt a stabbing pain in her heart. She moved her lips and took 2 steps towards him, as if she wanted to say something. But in the end, she lowered her eyes and turned away. Tian Xueqing was currently climbing a mountain. She carried a small medicine basket on her back and slowly climbed up the mountain path. The mountain wind was chilly, causing her face to hurt. Her green dress fluttered in the wind, and she looked as if she would fly away with the wind at any moment. In front of them was a narrow mountain path, barely enough for one person to pass through. Below them was a 1,000-foot cliff. She was afraid of heights. Tian Xueqing's face was slightly pale as she asked Wang Kai, "Are you sure that the Netherworld flower is not far ahead?" Wang Kai Piglet closed its eyes and sniffed carefully. Then it nodded firmly. "Yes, Master. The smell of the Netherworld flower is very strong. I'm sure it's right in front. However, Master, the path ahead is very dangerous." Tian Xueqing's footsteps paused for a moment before she slowly walked towards the small path. The longer the poison stays in her master's body, the greater the damage to her master's body. Chapter 2400. The longer the poison stayed in her master's body, the more damage it would cause to her master's body. Therefore, on the second day, she went up the mountain to pick herbs with Wonkai Piglet by her side. She had to climb up the mountain as soon as possible to get the Netherworld flower. She moved bit by bit, not daring to look down. The cliff below was so deep that it made her dizzy. Tian Xueqing walked on this path for less than 10 minutes, and her forehead was covered in cold sweat. The strong mountain wind blew, leaving behind a chill. The wind blew so hard that she almost couldn't stand still, and her body couldn't help but sway a few times. Wonkai Piglet walked behind her and didn't even dare to breathe loudly, fearing that it would startle its master. The wind carried the unique fragrance of a netherworld flower, which was faintly discernible and captivating. Tian Xueqing's eyes lit up. She should be there soon. At this moment, her feet suddenly slipped, and she couldn't help but lean forward. Wankai Piglet screamed and saw Tian Xueqing falling down like a kite with a broken string. Wankai Piglet suddenly jumped down, and its body suddenly changed rapidly, turning into a big pink pancake and quickly approaching Tian Xueqing. The moment Tian Xueqing landed on the ground, Wankai caught her and smashed her onto the ground with a bang. Tian Xueqing was fine. Wankai Piglet's meat cushion was soft and thick. She felt as if she had fallen into a ball of jelly and didn't suffer any injuries. She sat up and heard Wankai groaning in pain under her body. She quickly jumped down to check on its injuries. Wankai returned to its piggy form and said weakly, "Master, I'm fine, but the netherworld flower." It was about to say that it couldn't pick the netherworld flower when it suddenly smelled a strange fragrance that was faintly discernible and almost gone with the wind. Wankai sneezed, ran forward a few steps, and sniffed again. Its drooping ears instantly stood up, and it said excitedly, "Master, master, there seems to be a netherworld flower in front." Tian Xueqing's eyes lit up, and she followed Wankai Piglet in that direction. "We're here." Following Wansai's words, Tian Xueqing came to a small open space. There wasn't a single blade of grass here, but there was a blue flower in the middle. It was the netherworld flower that was emitting a cold yet soul-stirring scent. Tian Xueqing's eyes lit up, but she wasn't in a hurry to pick them. Instead, she cautiously checked her surroundings. After confirming that there was no danger, she went forward. The netherworld flower seemed to be flowing with light, and the entire flower had a dreamy color. The petals gently swayed in the wind, and a faint fragrance assaulted the senses. Everything was astonishingly beautiful, and it carried an indescribable aura of temptation. The closer Tian Xueqing got to the flower, the tighter her heart became. She suddenly felt a strong sense of unease. Something was wrong. Something was wrong. Tian Xueqing's heart was about to scream crazily. When she was an arm's length away from the flower, the intense uneasiness in her heart forced her to stop. Tian Xueqing took a deep breath. She felt that there was something wrong with this flower. She paused for a moment, then turned around and left. The moment she turned around, the flower suddenly trembled, and a snake's head was faintly discernible. Then, the flower moved and revealed its original form, a small blue snake, the netherworld snake. This snake was petite, but its poison was the strongest in the world. If an ordinary person was bitten by it, they would die immediately. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.